America. And we were fighting them and we wanted them out, but we couldn't get them out. And that's what's happening in Lebanon right now. So they're lobbing missiles over at Israel, or they were. Now Israel has to respond. So it wasn't Israel fighting Lebanon. It was just Hezbollah, the proxy that is paid for by Iran. And that's why, should the president unfreeze the billions of dollars that is Iranian money that's overseas and in bank accounts, they want that money unfrozen. But what will they do with that money? Will they use it to fund these proxies? Will they use it to fund Hezbollah? Or will they use it to, to rebuild their cities that have been bombed by Israel or by America?
Well, they definitely have to rebuild some of their infrastructure, but their stated goal as a country is this terror against the United States in Israel. So whether they do it within the next 3 years or they delay it 5 or 6 years, that is their stated goal. They can't exist without it. And you're exactly right, Asa. This is why the president says that the funds is going to be released in a phased approach. The Iranians wanted the money up front. The president said no. Also, Brian, you were talking about that blockade. I'm being told just because the blockade is being lifted doesn't mean that the troops are coming home. So they would allow the flow to take place, but the troops may stay to make sure the enforcement is in play, just in case Iran tries to, pull a fast one on us.
Yeah, we took out another one of those ships, guys, yesterday that just said, I'm going to ignore the blockades. We blew up their engine room. That's the way it is. They did one of those, an Indian vessel 2 days ago. There's a blockade there for a reason, and we got to enforce it. That's just the way it is. So the blockade on the blockade, which was unbelievably effective, is one of the reasons we're talking. And I don't know if you noticed it. I looked everywhere before the show started, going to the Middle Eastern outlets, all the ones I can read. And this would-be deal is different in that we always hear the president being optimistic, and then we hear Iran not being optimistic. This time, the most negative thing is I hear is we're not there yet, as opposed to the crazy Americans, death to America, and all the rhetoric. I think that hitting them for 2 days sent a message, we'll do it again. And I think the analogy of a boa constrictor just slowly suffocating them, I think got through to them. So we'll see if something happens in Switzerland this weekend.
Well, according to Axios, 2 sources told Axios the deal has been approved on the Iranian side at high levels, but likely not by the supreme leader. So that might be the holdout right now. Maybe they have to find him because he's in hiding. So it's harder to communicate.
Exactly.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox 1.
And so, yeah, buckle up. Interesting few hours. Certainly not standard, that's for sure. And thank you, buddy. And thanks for the coverage. Dan Niles of Niles Investment Management has this to say. It would not surprise me to see the stock trade well initially. After that, however, I think it gets a lot more dicey. I'm pleased to say that Dan joins us now for more. Dan, welcome back to the program. Why do you believe this gets dicey from here?
Well, I mean, if you look at it over the first 15 trading days, you've got additions to all the different indexes coming up. The earliest one, you can add it in is 5 days. The NASDAQ 100, you can add it in to that index in 15 days. And so that's going to force a lot of index buyers.
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell. We are live streaming on Rumble and YouTube. Also on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can watch either version of the live stream on the website. Thank you for joining. Please share the links and ask your social media to follow me. I greatly appreciate it. You can subscribe to the different channels that I have. I have YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. You can also follow me on X, TikTok, GETTR, Substack, and Patreon. Please help support the work that I do. All of these videos are for free. You can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. On the homepage at the very bottom, you can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. I'd greatly appreciate it if you help support the work that I do. Again, all these videos are for free. The markets have not opened up yet in New York. We are live streaming at 8:52 a.m. markets will be opening up in a little bit more than 30 minutes from now. The big news will be SpaceX IPO and the potential ceasefire agreement or memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran. So let's go over at least the pre-market data. The futures market for the S&P 500 is trading right now at 7,416. VIX is trading at 19. It's below the high point, so it looks like that spike that we had the last 2 days in the VIX is starting to go down. Currency markets are stable. The euro is trading at 115, and the Japanese yen is trading at 160.28. Bitcoin is trading at 63,500. Oil has been trading down. It's trading at 85.25, and natural gas has been trading up, and it's trading at approximately 3.1. Now, there's going to be a new range that I suspect with, at least in the near term, for oil. And that range is anywhere from $79 a barrel to approximately 87. Right now we're at 85, so we're near the middle there, maybe slightly higher than the middle. But 79 to 87 as a range for WTI. Natural gas, the range seems to be approximately 3.0 to approximately 3.3. So we're roughly in half. We're at 3.1 at the moment here. So let's, before we go to Bloomberg and start focusing on the SpaceX IPO, I want to just mention that SpaceX IPO, there's going to be such a flood of people wanting to buy. Now, who are the ones that are wanting to buy SpaceX? Retail investors for this IPO, institutional investors for their clients, high net worth clients, or even family offices will be buying into this. You also have managers that manage index funds and ETFs and mutual funds, pension fund managers. They're all going to be going into this, all at the same time. So the price, because there's going to be such a demand, the price is going to go up. But as the demand starts to fall over the days and weeks, what's going to happen is this SpaceX's price start to go down. I suspect that you're going to see a 20 or 30% drop in SpaceX after its peak of the IPO before it starts to stabilize and move upward. Long-term, SpaceX is a good investment. When I say long-term, 5-10 years, where you just accumulate shares and you don't even pay attention to it. But at this moment in time, because there's such a huge demand, the price action will be elevated and it's going to be far above fair market value. So if you go into this IPO, you're probably going to be paying more for it. Now, if you're a super long investor, like a family office or high net worth client, then you don't care. But for the retail investor, you're better off not buying and wait for that 20, 25, or 30% drop. Now, when is that going to happen? Probably within the next 3 months. So you're probably better off waiting until 2 months later. I know you want to play the action and you think it's all going to, but trust me on this. There's such a flood of buying and indexing and all this stuff that it's going to be too much for the retail investor to absorb when the shock happens. Now, if you're playing this very carefully, you might be able to make a little bit of money. But what if you're caught and you bought too high when the IPO went online, and now you have to wait for it to recover, and you may be waiting for 6 months. This is not uncommon where a retail investor buys into an IPO and they don't break even until 6 months later because of this price action. Wait it out, be patient. SpaceX is a good investment, but not right now. Wait approximately 2 to 3 months. All right, with that said, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Myotrol. Myotrol helps to build muscle. If you're 40 years of age or older, you have atrophy. It's harder to build muscle. The reason being, as you get older, your genes methylate, and they don't express the way they used to when you were younger. Myotrol helps with the gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. It reduces atrophy. It has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to allow for your expression to take hold. It also helps the health of the mitochondria. So you're going to have more energy to maintain your muscles. Do some resistance training, take the Myotrol. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Build that muscle, that's really important. That's going to help with your, not just musculature, but your posture. Make sure you do back muscle exercises. It's going to help with the flow of your lymphatic system. So your immune system will improve with better posture because you're getting, you're having a flow that's improved. In addition, when you're doing resistance training, you're building muscle, you're building up leg muscles and calf muscles, which helps to pump for the lower extremities. Your calves are actually your second heart. And if you have strong calves, you're going to have better lymphatic flow from your extremities back up to your torso. In addition, you're going to have better venous return flow to your heart. And you have better musculature in your legs. There's also studies that have shown that life expectancy increases when you have more muscle mass in your legs. If you look at people that are starting to have cardiovascular problems in their geriatric years, you start to look at the age of individuals. If they have very thin legs, they usually die earlier. They don't have longevity. Their lifespan is truncated. So having musculature in your legs is really important. Now, too much can be a problem, but not enough is a problem. So you want to balance it. You want to build some muscle in your legs, especially your calves. It's going to help with your lymphatic flow and also your venous return flow to your heart. In addition, building up muscle is going to help to protect your brain. How that works is that it's going to help with building up higher concentrations of myokines, and those myokines and BDNF will be neuroprotective. So if you want to protect your brain, you need to build muscle. If you want to protect your skeletal system and have denser bone, have better posture, and more mobility, you need to build muscle. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Myotrol.
Yesterday was going to put off a third round of strikes last night, and the deal was closed. Well, here are some shares. Alphabet, of course, has a big stake in SpaceX. Alphabet, no doubt, will move on the prospects for SpaceX today.
Our focus, of course, on SpaceX, the company and its prospects, but so many businesses in the broader space industry. Paying attention to how this goes, looking at sort of what this means for their fortunes going forward, taking a look here at stocks in that broader space industry. A volatile day, I think, like a lot of folks, wondering sort of what's going to happen here as all of this plays out as we wait trading on the NASDAQ. But you see shares mixed in EchoStar, Rocket Lab, and AST Space Mobile. Continue to watch those throughout the day to kind of look through that prospectus that SpaceX released, forecasting a radically different future, so much opportunity in space, portending here a new economy, a space economy. We'll see how other companies fit into that going forward. Bonnie?
All right, David. Well, as we've been saying, SpaceX set to make its market debut in the largest IPO in history. It's a landmark moment for both Wall Street and the space industry.
I think feels like a milestone moment. This was an investment thesis that was unthinkable a decade ago for most investors.
SpaceX is the biggest rising star of all time. They have no net debt. So it's clearly an IG-rated company as we stand today.
I'm actually quite bullish and optimistic for its impact on the industry. I think there's going to be a lot of capital that flows back into other space names as well.
SpaceX is one of the most important infrastructure projects of our time, and really a very big cash generator.
What SpaceX is doing is actually integrating not just across its space technologies, but it's creating infrastructure on Earth and in space to basically do a lot of AI compute.
Joining us at the desk now for this hour is Bloomberg Tech co-host Ed Ludlow. He's been reporting on SpaceX and Tesla, of course, for years. Ed, of course it's investment grade. It's going public today. Does it stay investment grade? And how many times does it go back to the market?
I think the significance of the reporting there is that we're very fixated on the biggest IPO in history, and they'll raise $75 billion, and that's astonishing what they'll use the proceeds for, pay down some debt, but capital expenditure, right? It's highly analogous with what we see in the hyperscaler space. And the expectation on that IG rating significance is that they'll come back to the markets in some form, right? Equity or debt. This year was about a race to IPO, SpaceX, Anthropic, OpenAI. Actually, the way that lots of investors who have exposures to all three companies, they've got a bit of a headache on their hands, is that it's a race for capital, with Alphabet coming in strong into the equity market, and everyone else probably coming quickly to follow suit.
I picked up the prospectus from Rocket Road there in Starbase, Texas, 200 plus pages.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
I myself didn't read all of them, but I was drawn to this kind of caveat emptor in the document. Our growth strategy may take longer to execute than anticipated. Right. You may not realize a return on your investment within the time frame you anticipate, or at all. That clause there is stuck with me.
Yeah, SpaceX management has been clear that the timelines and horizons for the story they're telling, the vision of being an AI company where the total addressable market is $26.5 trillion, it will take time to get there. What's interesting about that is, like, right now, however we trade today, right, it's a moment in time. There's not as much emphasis being put on what is it that they currently do? And what they currently do is have the Starlink business, which in 25 was profitable in isolation, cash flow positive, although there isn't a cash flow number in the prospectus. And they've become a neo cloud. They rent data center capacity to Google, which happens to be one of their biggest investors, and Anthropic, on paper one of their biggest rivals. And what's so interesting is behind closed doors, a lot of these venture and growth and mutual funds that are already on the cap table tell me, we actually not paying too much attention to that long distant future business model. We're pretty stoked about the current business and how they've hedged with this data center plan.
Does it remind you of when Amazon suddenly realized it had a cloud business and that's what paid for everything else for a moment in time there?
Yeah, it's highly analogous to that. The cash cow in the interim period will be SpaceX through XAI is very good at building data centers and running them on the best dollar per token basis. And they can't work out how to use all of the capacity themselves to train their own or run their own models. So they're saying, well, someone else can use it in isolation, and we'll make money from that.
And you're going to stick with us, not just for this block, but for the entirety of the hour, as SpaceX makes its market debut today. A huge question is whether markets can absorb another mega cap AI play as concerns continue to grow about AI spending and returns. I want to discuss those market implications now with Bloomberg macro strategist Michael Ball, who joins us here on set in New York as well. Let's pull back here. I mentioned at the top, a lot of space industry participants watching this unfold. More broadly than that, there were a lot of gigantic companies poised to go public. We're waiting to see how this goes as well.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. One, the market narrative right now is clearly either Iran. It's clearly these kind of rethinking of the AI trade, winner's a loser, where capacity is constrained, where it's not, who has the pricing power, and then obviously the SpaceX. And the SpaceX feeds back into your question here. Buybacks versus new issuance. This is the first year where we're seeing that actually look a little flattish. And we don't know yet where Anthropic obviously going to be and where OpenAI is going to be, so that will add to the pile. But as it stands right now, it's more balanced. So that tailwind that's been around for several years, it's always been this passive flow, constantly being kind of leaned into as there's going to be buyers coming in from the corporate side, is no longer as a short.
Why set the price pre-IPO $135? Is there precedent for this?
Well, there is usually some setting of the price, but to your point, why at that level? I think that's probably where they thought they could get the best deal. And again, we'll find out today when it opens how much it goes up. And I get your point because the shadow market is showing a little bit of a higher premium to that. And then, you know, the murmur among traders is it could fly given how much it's being subscribed. But I don't really have a great answer for exactly why that level. I think they all got together in a room and decided that was where it should be.
What I jump in and say is that, you know, our reporting is that unusually, even though the bankers will make a lot of money from this transaction, Elon Musk and the rest of the SpaceX management team had very firm control behind setting 135 early. What's so interesting, right, is that it's way oversubscribed on the institutional side and on the retail side. All you can trade today in the session is whatever was put into the market on the float. Like, how does that work?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is my worry that there's going to be a spike. You're going to see some beneficiaries with it, especially like the Googles who have a stake.
Probably going to spike to about 225.
I see the neo clouds because it's showing, again, that's where the capacity constraints are. And we're going to have maybe a gamma squeeze as well because we have the froth has come out in the last 2 weeks. We've all seen that. We've seen a more volatile tape. We've seen it in the semis. We've seen it in the NASDAQ. That's been especially the area that was overbought and the option markets were showing us. So now we've kind of had a chance to reload. Things aren't as long, so there's a chance now for everyone to pile back in. And for the last 2 or 3 weeks, retail and institutional trading have been in lockstep. And back to Ed's point, they're in lockstep again going into this IPO, which again gives us dry powder that can really ramp things up and make for an interesting show. Then again, of course, how long do we stay at these levels and what's the implications further out for volatility?
But also, the size of oversubscription is relative, right? So 4 times oversubscribed is not normally a huge amount oversubscribed. It's just that this is a massive IPO, and so therefore maybe it's a little more than usual. Yeah.
Big part of it. I think we've never seen anything like it. I've been pushing back on the traders and PMs I'm talking to who are getting experts telling them things. I think we don't really have anything to really look at in the past to gauge this as. And also, again, it is a certified NeoCloud thing we understand, but then there's this dream further out that's obviously Elon's done in other ways with Tesla and stuff as well. So if anyone says they think they know where this is going right now, I would just say, let's wait and see.
Michael, we will be chatting to you throughout the morning. That is Bloomberg macro strategist Michael Bull, and Ed Ludlow is sticking with us. And don't miss a special edition of Bloomberg Tech at 11 a.m. Eastern, and an exclusive conversation with Jim Chanos, who said this is an IPO that's built on hope. That conversation on Bloomberg Money at noon. The U.S. and Iran are edging closer to signing an agreement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, according to senior officials. The deal could be signed next week during the G7 summit near Geneva. Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall has the details. What changed right before the market closed yesterday, Tyler? It suddenly seemed that the president was a lot more enthusiastic, and then Mayor came out this morning and gave somewhat of support to what the president has said.
Right, Bonnie, we're tracking a few different developments today, but the overarching theme here is that G7 officials tell Bloomberg News that a senior Iranian official last night did indicate that a deal is likely. There seems to be this renewed hope that they are getting towards a diplomatic solution, though a reporting does caution that Iran has not said that it is ready to sign just yet, and that any agreement still needs Iran's supreme leader's approval. Now, we've been tracking that the two sides are working towards a memorandum of understanding that would first seek to extend the ceasefire by 60 days. Then we would see a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz prioritized within the first 30 days, and the U.S. lift its naval blockade. Once those components are in place, then we could expect those longer-term discussions around what potential curves to Iran's nuclear program would look like. But we got a flurry of reports out from Iranian state media today about some of the provisions in what is reportedly the 14 points in this agreement that could prove problematic, including that Iran is saying that they will not restore the Strait of Hormuz to pre-war levels, seeming to indicate that they want to retain some sort of grip over the waterway, even if a deal is reached. Keep in mind, about 140 ships used to transit through the strait before the conflict began. But then there were some of these other provisions included too, including that the U.S. would have to withdraw assets from the region, unfreeze half of Iran's frozen assets, and suspend oil sanctions. At this point, Bonnie, we'll have to see what the U.S. actually agrees to in any sort of final agreement, but the White House at this point is still pointing towards that they are pushing for this deal and that they have conferred with regional allies.
Could happen as soon as Sunday, according to Bloomberg's reporting. A lot to get to before that, including the president's birthday, Flag Day, of course, and that cage match on the south lawn of the White House. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall from Washington, thank you very much for that update. Let's do a quick check of the markets here as we wait trading to begin in SpaceX.
Yeah,
the S&P futures up here.
I'm going to pivot over to Al Jazeera right now, talking about this. Israeli military has issued more forced displacement orders.
Well, that's where there is a bit of doubt, because what we saw play out, Scott, over the past few weeks of these talks and these mediations is that the U.S. president was willing to put a close, a tight leash on Israeli actions in Lebanon, even though Washington insists that the Lebanon track is separate from the Iran track. In effect, in practicality, they are not. An escalation in Lebanon can and might very likely torpedo talks with Iran. And so this is where the rift, this is where the interests of the U.S. and Israel diverge. And the question is, who calls the shot? We've seen the U.S. president say over the past few days in different interviews, he is the one who calls the shots. But we've also heard from Israeli officials saying that Israel is a very important ally of the U.S. and it has to be able to say no to Washington when that serves its national interest. That is still an open question, Scott, and it's difficult to imagine Israel completely going against U.S. Command, if you will, when it comes to these issues, because again, the relationship is so intertwined and the dependency or the interdependency is such that it would be difficult to see that decoupled at this point in time, at this point in the relationship between Israel and the United States.
Excellent point. Al Jazeera's Nora Day for us live in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Nora, thank you. Let's go to Al Jazeera's Heidi Pett now, who's with us from Beirut. So Heidi, assuming that Lebanon is part of this deal, are the Israelis giving any signals on the ground right now that they are preparing to wind down their war effort there?
In a word, no, Scott. And I mean, as Noor was just explaining from Ramallah, the Israelis have made it very clear that they don't consider themselves to be part of this deal, let alone Lebanon. And it is very dangerous to assume.
This is the reason why this memorandum of understanding and the 60-day hiatus and see how the ceasefire goes, it's all going to blow up, literally, not metaphorically, and we're going to be back where we're at. I do not believe that Trump can have a sustained peace agreement with Iran. My concern is that he gets a peace agreement, he loses interest, he leaves the region, and we're worse off. Now, are we going to get the nuclear material or not? We cannot allow them to maintain high enrichment of nuclear material. That's just a no-go. But Trump seems to think that he's going to be able to negotiate it. This is very similar to what was happening with the tariffs last year. He would have these demands of high tariffs against certain countries, and then he would negotiate it down, and then eventually, it stabilized at a certain rate. And once that agreement happened, then the court system said you can't do that. This is something very similar in the sense that the agreements that happened for tariffs mean nothing now. The agreement with Iran will mean nothing in the near future. This is not going to last. One, the Iranians, I don't think, are honest brokers. Secondly, the United States seems to be losing its fortitude in terms of putting ground forces in the region, taking the oil, taking the natural gas, and securing the Strait of Hormuz and destroying the IRGC. They're not willing to do it. So what this does is emboldens the IRGC for a future reconstituting. And if they're still around and they reconstitute, they're going to be able to fund Hezbollah and Hamas again. On top of the Israelis, they don't really care about this deal. Now we're told in the news, in the FT, in the Wall Street Journal, in the New York Times, on CNN and Al Jazeera and all that Trump is going to force Netanyahu to accept it. Really? You really think that's going to happen? Yeah, they might accept it for a week, a month, 6 months, but the conflict is going to continue because you didn't solve the problem. You didn't get to the root cause. The IRGC has to be destroyed. Anything less than that, we're only kicking the can down the road. And Trump wasn't willing to go all out to do that. Now that means ground troops. And that's what should have happened. But now Congress is not happy with the way the operation is being conducted. He's ran the clock out. He's getting close to the midterm elections. Now oil will go down because there's going to be a flow of tankers through the strait, and we're seeing that now. But will we get back to $58 a barrel? Probably not. I think Trump failed on this big time.
Senior fellow at the Center for International Policy. She is also the host of the Iran podcast. Thank you for being here, Negar. Can you help us make sense of what we're looking at right now? Because it seems like the Iranians are, by and large, on board here, but is there something that's preventing them from getting to the final stage, from actually signing the paper?
I mean, we're looking at leaks or reporting from both sides that literally don't match. You and I have it in front of us, right? At least in details. But the big structure seems to be that
the IRGC is fractured. There's 20, 30 different little local factions. We don't even know if the supreme leader has a brain or is alive. What capacity does he have in really leading? It's in big question. On top of this Islamic, I'll call it Islamic fascism, but this Islamic fascism in Iran, the Shiite belief system that's fanatical, they are smart enough to realize, let's try to fight another day. But there's factions within the Shiite IRGC groups where they're thinking, you know what, let's just continue on with the fighting. So you have infighting within Iran. You have a supreme leader that may be incapacitated or have limited capability, cognitive capability. And you have very high inflation, a terrible economy in Iran. So it's unstable, but the Iranians have been playing this out for 47 years. They've been able to continue on fighting in that region.
administration twice in the middle of negotiations they attacked, and now they're trying to negotiate and make a deal during wartime. And there are no real guarantees. That's why we see a lot of this language of upfront. We want to see the money, the frozen assets, we want to see this and that, because there's no trust that if the this administration says something, signs it, they're actually going to abide by it. And also look back at history. Iran did negotiate with the United States of America a deal called the JCPOA under President Obama. And then the next president came from the opposite party and said, I don't like this, I'm going to pull out of it. So there's also that sort of history and memory, and they want to have, that's why they're trying to do it step by step, get whatever they can up front or one for one. And then also throughout the process, another thing we've learned from this administration is that we don't have a lot of the bureaucrats at least on the US side, people who can negotiate, who can do real diplomacy. And this is very complicated, hard work that needs seriousness, technical expertise. And so I don't know if it's, possible to pull it off.
I'm interested in what came out of the Israeli Prime Minister's office saying that the president has essentially indicated that the final deal, once everything is negotiated, would include things like limits on Iran's ballistic missile capabilities and their support for proxy networks. I mean, is that pie in the sky? Is that something that the Iranians could ever agree to?
No, it's going to blow up.
Certainly not now. I mean, look, U.S. and Israel, two superpowers.
No, what's going to happen is that we're going to release funds that we've commandeered, and they're going to use that funds to try to bolster up the IRGC, help the society out a little bit. But then there's going to be another war because we don't get to the root cause of the problem. The Shiite religion in the fanatical form wants to destroy Israel. Israel isn't going to accept that. So it's going to be never-ending fighting. The only way this is going to end is unconditional surrender of the IRGC. Unconditional, not conditional. This agreement is conditional. This is the point that I've been making for the last few shows. General Grant won the Civil War because he was willing to kill everybody. And he didn't care. Where's the generals? Why do you know what we have now? We have a bunch of generals that go to West Point. Some of them even go to Harvard for graduate school. But we have a bunch of generals that over-intellectualize war. Well, can we bomb that or not? Maybe that's a war crime. Maybe we need to have a political solution. No. The American taxpayer spent tons of money to finance your education to win wars. Not to over-intellectualize wars. Win. Fight. Kill. Blow stuff up. That is what we paid. We used our tax-paying dollars to pay for their education at West Point and their graduate studies. The American taxpayers paid for these generals' education. So, win wars. But what we have here is a bunch of generals that know about organization, know about leadership, know about procurement and supply chain and political economies, international affairs. Yeah, they know weaponry, but for some odd reason, there is a very high percentage of generals within the United States that are serving active duty that can't win wars. Why are we spending $1 trillion where you can't win a war? They're asking for $1 trillion. Some of it's for procurement. The thing is that you should be able, with that much money, Mr. General, to win in Iran. Now, what happens with the generals is they'll say, well, we could have won, but it was Congress, or there wasn't a political will, or whatever. Yeah, whatever. Win. We need generals that are willing to destroy the enemy. Force them to capitulate unconditionally. This ceasefire is conditional. So we didn't win. And this is only going to rear its head again, either with nuclear capability, biological capability, with more accurate and more distant missile technology, further development of drone technology in defense and offense. And we're not talking 50 years down the road or even 20 years down the road. We're talking 5 years down the road or less, because everything will develop quicker because of AI. Everything. Medicine,
engineering, military, everything is going to develop twice or 4 times the speed that we're used to. 2 times. Think about your life in a 10-year period and what has happened. In your work, what sort of things have been available to purchase? If you're in engineering, you'll understand the whole development cycle. Just imagine what you could do in 10 years and times it by 2 or 4 times. That's what's going to happen with AI. So the runway in the future is not 10 or 20 years for Iran to reconstitute with more capability. It's 5 years or less. So I get back to the point. The root cause of the problem is that the Shiites want to eliminate Israel. Now, Israel needs to fight their own fight, and the United States needs to stop supporting them. We spend way too much money on Israel. But the thing is that this isn't going to magically disappear because Trump signed an agreement. The only way this is going to end is that the IRGC is completely destroyed.
Have doubled from April into May. That's according to Ukraine's defense minister. And Ukraine hopes that these will begin.
All right, let's listen to General Keane.
The future of human longevity starts here. Introducing the HumeBand 2.0, the world's first longevity.
Oh, welcome back. Good Friday morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Friday, June 12th. It is 8:01 on the East Coast. We kick off the hour with the hot topic of the hour. President Trump has canceled planned strikes on Iran, saying that there's been progress in discussions with Tehran's leadership. The president saying in part on Truth Social, quote, discussions and final points have been, in both concept and great detail, approved by all parties involved, including the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Turkey, Pakistan, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, Egypt, and others. The Navy blockade will remain in full force and effect until the transaction is finalized. Time and place of the signing to be announced shortly. The president also revealing a peace deal could be just days away. Watch.
We just made a great settlement of the war with Iran, and we'll be subject to finalization of documents. We should get them over the next few days. Probably have a signing maybe in Europe, and great thing. Stock market's up 1,000 points. That means they like the deal. Oil's dropped. Oil will start coming down to, I think, even lower than it was before.
Joining me now is Fox News senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane, back with us. General, good to see you. Thanks for.
Let me just pause here. Trump thinks that oil is going to trade lower than when the war started. When the war started, it was trading at about $55, $56, $57 a barrel. You really think it's going to trade lower than that? If it trades lower than that, then the oil producers are going to have to shut their wells because they're not making any money. See, sometimes Trump is stupid the way he talks. He talks like a 13-year-old. He thinks like a 13-year-old. All right, markets are open right now. The S&P 500 is trading at 7,407. VIX is trading below 20. It's at 19. The dollar is stable. The euro is trading at 115. Japanese yen is still trading at 160.20. Bitcoin is trading at 63,000. Oil is trading at $85.48 a barrel. Again, the trading range, I suspect, will be approximately 79 to about 87 or so. Assuming that there is a signed memorandum of understanding, which won't last, but maybe it gets signed. And Natural gas is trading at 3.08.
Here, the president says VP J.D. Vance will be in Europe this weekend, potentially to sign a deal. But of course, we've been here before. Your reaction?
Right. Well, we have been here many times before, but the reason we're here now is because the president was willing to use military operations to leverage the Iranians to get serious about a deal. And it appears that has put us on the pathway to signing this framework agreement. Now, remember, the framework agreement...
Now, let's get this straight. If the IRGC is still constituted, then they can still fund Hamas and Hezbollah. So they're still going to be fighting on the borders around Israel. And they will still be able to slowly build up their military capability. This is the reason why, if you think about why World War II was so successful, was because the Nazis were completely destroyed. The Japanese surrendered unconditionally. This is not winning. This is only kicking the can down the road. Are the people in Iran freer? No. Stupid, stupid. Because Trump ran the clock out because he was afraid.
Up the Straits of Hormuz were dead, Iran not having any control. We would eventually also, over time, release our naval blockade. But then the framework and the agreement, much of the challenges of the nuclear enterprise, removing it, not permitting enrichment, the ballistic missile development, the drone inventory, and support for proxies, that would all begin a 60-day clock to negotiate. So there's a lot of work ahead here. And I think the leverage of getting back using military force has accomplished this. I wouldn't be surprised, Maria, if we didn't have to do it again.
Same.
Because look at right now, within 24 hours, we're seeing what we've heard before. The people that talk to the president from Iran tell him one thing, and then we have other officials in the government right now saying, well, we haven't agreed to X, Y, and Z. We're not going to do that. So there's always this inconsistency coming from Iran in terms of what they say. And then when it comes down to what they do...
I'm going to go back to Bloomberg because of the IPO or SpaceX.
Going forward, yes, there are going to be some very rich people who are calling up their brokers and looking for ever more expensive houses. And
if you are a retail investor, do not buy SpaceX right now. You're going to get hurt.
Maybe Sima sells herself short on there is a macro level impact here. One thing I would say is that SpaceX employees over a number of years have had multiple liquidity opportunities because SpaceX does what's called a tender.
Today,
offers the opportunity for insiders to sell shares to give them liquidity.
Today is not the retail investor day for SpaceX. Today is the well-heeled ones that were able to invest early on. That's their day. So just wait it out. You'll be fine. Just wait 2 months or so.
California in particular, where around Hawthorne there is a great ripple effect and an ecosystem of startups literally born out of SpaceX. But yeah, like the macro level effects as well is like, if you could just do this form, just ask Seema about it. The point is like, this is the biggest IPO in history. It's just the beginning of SpaceX tapping the capital markets in every guise, you know, and not just SpaceX, everyone.
Yeah, I just want to mention that space-related stocks have taken a turn lower now, and you see the likes of Redwire and Lunar and SATS and so on down 4 and 5% apiece. Now they did gain quite substantially yesterday, but if you look at Hyperliquid, we're also seeing that premium for SpaceX shares just come off a little bit. So we will be obviously monitoring the situation. It's going to be a volatile day, we know that. Stima, can I come back to you and ask you generally about IPOs? Do you tend to have clients enthusiastic about IPOs, or do you always want to wait until they're included in indexes and until maybe 6 months down the road when, you know, more capital raises or lockups have expired?
I think it's a very, very mixed picture. I mean, with this one specifically, you can imagine that the the clients are very, very split on how they feel about it. You've got some which are real believers and are willing to look away from some of the balance sheet numbers, which are concerning. And then you've got others who are really focused on the balance sheet and really don't want to have a look into it. I think the one general positive point, though, that we're getting from everyone is that this is really good news to see this wave of IPOs back into the market, and that just gives a lot of confidence once again to the public market, which I think to some extent have been waning in previous years.
Can I ask you lastly, just to kind of dovetail this with the inflation story, of course, a really big one over the course of this week, aside from the SpaceX story here, but getting that underwhelming read on inflation from the U.S. government, looking at what the ECB did earlier this week, raising rates, or help us understand the broader economic moment, the kind of cauldron in which this is happening.
I think this is a really, really strong moment. There's a lot of volatility and there's a lot of risks. And as you said, specifically, the one thing that everyone's focused on from a macro side is about inflation and how central banks are going to be responding. We feel fairly confident, but again, so much of it really comes back down to the Strait. When is it going to reopen? How much oil price is going to come down? And that's key. But the basic macro picture, with really driven by the AI capex wave, which is, we can't look away from that for any moment, as well as resilient consumer spending, is I think the things that keep investors in beyond the IPOs, beyond even AI tech trade. It's a growth picture.
When it was time to add my son to our car insurance, I was scared to even think about my wallet. But instead, the drag.
The Venerable Bede is one of the iconic English figures in history and was widely considered among the most educated men in Europe.
Driven by lots of factors. The oversubscription on both the institutional retail side will be very severe. People will be desperate to get in on the IPO and face a decision if the shares that are available are those ones that are in the float. Like, if you're going to sell and buy at a certain point, buy and then sell at a certain point, that's up to you. I think the main takeaway from it is, they had preset a story out. Everyone has had time to digest the story. And however trading happens today, it's probably not reflective of whatever the roadshow entailed, right? It's a future where there are data centers in space, and SpaceX is an enterprise AI company. That hasn't changed since I went to bed last night and woke up this morning.
No, it has not. Our thanks to both of you. That is Principals Seema Shah joining us there, and of course Ed Ludlow, host of Bloomberg Tech. Let's get a check on the stock market right now, because we are seeing some of those gains continue and some of them just come off the boil a little bit. So we have 337 stocks higher in the S&P 500, just more than 100 of them lower. Some positive sentiment in this market for sure. It's not just about the SpaceX IPO. In fact, you could argue that it's more about geopolitical just de-escalation. We don't have an agreement yet. There's the G7 next week. It looks like there's an effort to have some kind of memorandum of understanding signed there. Though again, there are 14 points on the Tehran proposal that was sent out by MER, the state agency, and it's not clear that some of them won't be red lines for President Trump. So we'll see what happens over the weekend. But of course, this market has its eyes firmly on the SpaceX IPO. If you take a look, the AI trade is pretty much back. We have the likes of AMD and NVIDIA leading things here, gains of 1% plus a piece. The memory chip makers after that call yesterday continued to gain, having gained spectacularly in yesterday's trade. I think SanDisk was up more than 15% yesterday. Alphabet is higher, although if you notice, it is actually erasing some of those gains. And the interesting thing about it is that some stocks related to space and the space trade are seeing massive declines right now. So Redwire, for example, is down almost 10%, and we have Lunar Labs, Sats, and so on. Several of those companies are lower. Perhaps it's money being taken off the table so it can go into the SpaceX IPO when it does actually start trading. Perhaps it's a sell the news event. Perhaps it's just that the space trade is now fully priced, according to people. But we'll see how that progresses throughout the day. So if you look at the sectors in the S&P 500, a little bit like yesterday, you have energy, one of the laggards. This has oil declines on deal hopes. And then, interest rate sensitive sectors like financials, real estate, utilities, and materials all gaining. Not a huge amount of actual news underpinning this, just a broad sentiment, I would say, today, David.
Yes, broad sentiment, I think, is the overarching story of the trade today. Bonnie, thank you very much. And coming up, we head to the NASDAQ, where SpaceX investors and executives are celebrating on this historic day. That's coming next on Bloomberg Open Interest.
what they do is completely different than what they say. They said ceasefire 2 months ago, and they have violated that time and time again, firing into the Straits of Hormuz, firing at U.S. bases, firing at our allies and partners in the region, and certainly unleashing Hezbollah inside of Lebanon to over 2,000 rockets and drone attacks into northern Israel, forcing the evacuation of those towns and villages. This is who Iran really is. And it's going to take the leverage of military force to hold their feet to the fire. We're in the early stages of a process here. And the president and his team, listen, they're clear, right? They know who they're dealing with here. They know they're dealing with liars, and they know they're dealing with cheaters, and they know that they're dealing with people, Maria. At the end of the day, what does Iran really want here? They want to go back to where they were. That's a fact. And they'll say anything to get there. And they'll sign anything to get there. So what they really need from us is they want us to give them money, get them flush with money so they can recover. And then they'll go about reversing everything that they agree to do. Right. And so the deal itself has to go into it with that in mind, so it endures past the current president of the United States. And they know this. They know what the Iranians are up to, because this is the first administration that has ever confronted them in any consequential way. So the deal has to have provisions in it that prevent a reversal. And the administration is very well aware of that. And Iran will fight and oppose any of those kind of terms that will hold their feet to the fire and not give them the ability to go right back where they were when the war started. That's who these guys are, and that's what they want out of this.
Yeah, and you know, Iran's state media and their propaganda is out there just throwing out different items to see what sticks. Like, for example, one headline earlier was about the uranium and a speculation that the president would allow the uranium to stay in Iran. How important is it for the U.S. to get what they want in terms of that uranium? And also, General, you know, as SpaceX is ready to debut on the NASDAQ today, everyone's talking about this big IPO. Iran is reportedly planning to treat all of Elon Musk's companies as quote-unquote military targets. Iran state media claims Elon Musk's holdings were used by the U.S. military to, quote, carry out war crimes. And I'll just point out that this is all happening from Iran planning to treat Elon Musk's companies as military. The U.S. is clamping down on more Chinese companies, designating companies like Alibaba, BYD, Baidu as, quote, companies that support China's military. The Pentagon's list is now at 188 military companies, up from 134 last year. And China's embassy in Washington is calling this blacklisting discriminatory, General. I thought that was an interesting angle as well.
Nueva York. Yeah, well, so our audience understands if you're a company operating in China, and even a private sector company, in other words, it's not a state-sponsored company, and it has a technology that appears to be used for commercial purposes. That any technology whatsoever, whether it's one of their private sector companies or a state-owned enterprise, and it appears to be just for commercial purposes, that technology will always, if it applies and they welcome it, be used for military purposes. That's just a given. This administration clearly understands that. They're not going to buy into the confusion that China and its propaganda tool puts out there. That's why that list is as long as it is, 188 and growing. Yeah. And now we've added these commercial companies to it. Why? Because they take that technology and they use it to strengthen their military. There's just no doubt about that. That is who they are. And we've got to watch them like a hawk, and we've got to monitor this activity. Otherwise, China gets leverage that they shouldn't have. And that's the reality of it. Listen, in the long run, Maria, I have total confidence in our system. You know, he believes his state version of capitalism, authoritarian based, and because he can bend them to his will, is the strongest system in the United States. He has never understood us. The fact that we have an open democracy, capitalistic-driven system here, free of any government controls except some basic regulations, it encourages and inspires innovation and creativity. This is how we beat the Chinese. We're going to beat them on, we can outthink them, we can out-innovate them and out-create them. And we've proven that time and time again, and we have to also put the right military capability in the region to deter military activity. So what we're doing here is the right thing and unleash what we have in this country. SpaceX is a perfect example of a commercial enterprise that is exploding with capability and rivals NASA in terms of what it can do. Quite remarkable.
Yeah, I know. I just thought it was
All right, we're going to be going to Bloomberg. We're going to be going to Bloomberg because they're going to be talking about the IPO. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Orange Splash Structural Nano Silver lozenges. It's fortified with vitamin C, perfect for the allergy season, the cold season. And if you're cleaning around the house or outside, take them prophylactically, and what will happen is that you're creating a barrier for your oral pharynx, so you're not getting an allergic reaction. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Orange Splash Structural Nano Silver lozenges.
Institutional market where a range allows them to come in and say, look what I can do. Look at my economic power in this point. The retail point that Yahira just made is super interesting because management at SpaceX believe that the retail investor understands their story so much better than Wall Street does. Wall Street, I know you're watching, sorry, that's the state of play. And it's highly analogous with Tesla. They believe that the retail investor would hold the shares for the long term, right? Just as Tesla retail shareholders have done. 20% might be lower than people maybe thought. There was reports of 30%. That hasn't happened in the end. How they play the open market, very interesting.
You stare down the barrel and talk to Wall Street directly. Talk to Sand Hill Road as well. Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia, Founders Fund. All of these folks stand to make a lot of money here as well. How are they thinking about this thing and what it means for VC investment going forward?
You know, for the LPs of those venture firms, funds, they'll be delighted. You know, in Andreessen Horowitz's case, this will be the biggest return in the company's history. It's actually the second most capital they've deployed. They put more into Databricks. Founders Fund is going to come up with like 50 billion stake. What's interesting is those venture firms, you assume that when they are excluded from lockup restrictions, that they sell, they liquidate. It doesn't necessarily work like that. Like they'll have a thesis of where they think the true value of the company should be, and whether the public equity matches that value, they'll find out like everyone else.
And thank you very much. Ed Ludlow, co-anchor of Bloomberg Tech, of course, following this very closely when that trading begins. I know he'll join us again to get us up to speed on what's happening on the NASDAQ. And coming up here, leveraged ETFs are on the horizon for retail investors getting risky with SpaceX. We're going to dig into that next on Bloomberg Open Interest.
Right now, the oil has been ticking up a little bit for WTI futures. It's trading at 86.40, and it's getting close to that resistance level of around 87. So we're near the high range. If this new range is holding, we're at the high range, and oil might start to, once it gets close to 87, it's probably going to start dropping down. So we're going to be testing that resistance level. Okay, let's see here. All right, let's listen into Mondani. What's going on in New York?
At Quantilope, we help brands like yours make confident, data-driven decisions. Our end.
All right, now this. New York City's Mayor, Zohran Mamdani, he is standing by his endorsement of fellow Democratic Socialist Darya-Liz Chevalier, despite a slate of truly alarming social media posts. Brian Yen is joining us. All right, Brian, the latest, please.
Stu, good morning. Well, Democratic Socialist Darlisa Avila Chevalier is running in the Democratic primary for New York's 13th House District by trying to run away from her deleted Twitter account featuring tweets like this, a photo of her wearing a defund police mask back in 2020 with the caption F12, slang for F the police. She also reposted tweets calling for abolishing all police, prisons, and borders, and reshared that all deportation is wrong. She's campaigning now on abolishing ICE. In more deleted tweets, Chevalier called for communism, now seizing the means of production, and even saying anarchy is very intriguing to her. During the 2020 election, she called former President Biden a war
This
criminal.
is what I'm talking about with the Democratic Party. These Democratic Socialists, these communists, they aren't part of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, philosophically, is predicated on life, liberty, and property rights. These socialists, they want to take away your property. They're antithetical to the Enlightenment. And the reason being is they're part of this postmodernism. They're part of this postmodern ethic or philosophy where it's all relative, that you should be able to take away the property of someone if they're successful because everyone should be equal. But the reality of the situation is the ones that are in power pushing this socialism actually fleece their constituency. They find ways of to be corrupt and gain power and money. Communism is a bad thing. Our constitutional republic cannot work with communism. They're a cancer. Mandani and the far left is a cancer to the United States. And part of this enlightenment in our constitutional republic is predicated on God, country, and family. Does these socialists really believe in God? Most of them are agnostic or atheist. They believe that the state is your God. They should control you. Are they for a country? They want to erode your affinity for patriotism. These Democratic Socialists took a knee, just like Kaepernick did. These Democratic Socialists have another national anthem. It's the Black national anthem. Well, that doesn't sound like the United States of America, does it? So they're against country, too. What about family? They're against family. DrPaulCottrell, how are the Democratic Socialists against families? They're trying to help the family be able to weather the financial storms of inflation. The Democratic Socialists, the liberal, because they don't have an affinity to God and some sort of higher power or some sort of religion, Abrahamic religion, they think it's okay to abort and kill over 65 million fetuses in the United States since 1972. They think that's okay. And then you wonder why the population of the United States is starting to decline and we need to have inflows of immigrants to just maintain the population, let alone grow it. We have to import immigrants because of all the abortions. Just think about that, from 1972. So the last 54 years or so, there's been over 65 million abortions. Now, the far majority of those are because of socioeconomic, not because of rape or incest or anything like that, or even medical emergency. The far majority of the abortions are because of social economic issues. 99% of them. Now think about that. For the last 54 years, the population of the United States could roughly be more than 65 million people without immigration. And when you have a growing population that also has rule of law and other capabilities, the society is more productive. When it's hardworking and when it's industrious and entrepreneurial, which the United States is, we had those fetuses go to full term and they lived into adulthood, we would have had a larger population and we would have had a stronger economy. No, the democratic socialists, the far left, wanted to kill the fetus. So they're not about family. They're not about God, and they're not about country. They're antithetical to the Enlightenment.
Said the United States is an effing disgrace and said both candidates are rapists. Still, New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani
think about
is
this.
doubling down.
Think about this. This person, Chevalier, or however you pronounce her name, is being supported by Mamdani, and she hates America. Now, what does this sound like? This sounds like Animal Farm. Napoleon the pig, aka Mamdani, wanting to run the farm that used to be run by capitalists. And she hates America. This is the future if we allow for these socialists to take hold. Now, people need to wake up. New York is the heartbeat of America. You've heard, well, no, it's really middle America is the heartbeat. No. Finance is the heart that pushes the blood through the body of America. And that heart is New York. And that heart is diseased right now because of people like this.
His endorsement of Chevalier fundraising for the 32-year-old who worked on his campaign.
No, I had not seen those tweets, and what I've heard from her, and what I know a lot of others in the district have heard from her, is that her views have evolved and that the campaign that she's running on is reflective of what she's going to be fighting for.
Oh, she's no longer a real democratic socialist. She's just a crypto democratic socialist. These people are snakes, and they're trying to destroy America. And they're going to fleece. They're going to try to make money on it in the process. Look at Omar and what she did with all the fraud.
Since her tweets. Meanwhile, she admits to showing up to an anti-Israel rally the day after the October 7th terrorist attacks, organizing anti-Israel Columbia University protests, and recently campaigned at a mosque led by a sheikh who praised the October 7th Hamas attack.
I condemn Hamas. I've told you that I do not believe that celebrating the loss of anybody's life is okay. And that's what I'm saying.
Chevalier is trying to unseat five-term Democrat and chair of the Hispanic Caucus, Representative Adriano Espaillat, who has Governor Kathy Hochul's support. He says Chevalier's tweets do prove that she is simply unfit for office.
It's just crazy. I'll tell you, it's just absolutely crazy with these people. It's sad. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support capitalism and help support the work that I do by getting the Manuka honey structural nano silver lozenges. Again, this is very important for the allergy season, the cold season, even when you're cleaning around the house. Take them the moment you have that throat irritation or prophylactically. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Manuka honey structural nanosilver lozenges.
Judge Christopher Cooper ruled last month that Congress named the Center for John F. Kennedy, and only Congress can change it. But the administration now argues the president's hand-picked board members should be able to add a secondary name.
They're putting the finishing touches on the massive arena that's being built on the White House lawn. 4,000 spectators expected to watch the arena on Sunday, President Trump's 80th birthday. Expect tight sports security this weekend. We've got the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Final, the World Cup, and that UFC fight all happening. Long night of violent storms in the Midwest. Today it's all about the Northeast and all about the wind, which could be bad. You're listening to ABC News.
A modern soccer stadium has over 700 miles of fiber optic cable, improving every detail of the game experience. For example,
the pricing there, not exactly a surprise, $135 a share, but let's talk about some of the oversubscription numbers, because Bloomberg reporting, we're talking about 4 times oversubscribed for this IPO. Retail apparently submitting orders of $100 billion. Then you think about the institutional side, Bloomberg reporting that BlackRock, their short order said to target $5 billion, just one of many here. I wonder what all of this portends when you wrap it together for how this company, how this IPO is going to open tomorrow when it finally begins trading.
Look, it's going to be a watershed moment, not just for SpaceX, but for Musk. I think also the market is trying to understand like what reception is going to look like, what the ripple effect is across the rest of tech. And when we talk about, I think a big reason for some of the sell we've seen in tech over the last week is an anticipation of this in terms of a little, white knuckle moment. But it comes down to like anyone that's owning SpaceX, you're buying it for the Musk factor. And many that bet against Tesla and Musk going back a decade ago, that was proven historically wrong.
Well, Dan, that's where I want to go, the Musk factor, because something, I've been talking about a lot on this show, on various podcasts, is the idea of the Elon Musk premium. That has been a huge benefit to shares of Tesla. Now you have, another crown jewel of the Musk empire that's entering the public markets. Before this, it was really just Tesla that was your only public market entry point into that universe. Can that Elon Musk premium be sustained across 2 different publicly listed companies?
Well, look, and to that point, we believe over the next year, we talk about over an 80% chance that Tesla and SpaceX ultimately merge. Because I think that's part of the broader plan.
I think so.
Specifically when it comes to AI, data, and all under that Musk ecosystem, especially from a control perspective. Look, it's all about fourth industrial revolution. And I think when you look at what we've seen with Tesla, and of course the success that SpaceX has had, especially over the last decade, now it comes down to rubber meets the road. Sure. What does investor reception look like? And I think like I said, I think it's extremely important, not just for SpaceX, but in terms of the broader market, in terms of what we're seeing, because Anthropic, OpenAI, and others, in terms of what's around the corner.
Yeah, and that's based on Bloomberg reporting when we talk about how oversubscribed this deal already is, as well as some of the options being put on the table, alternatives, I should say, being put on the table out there for retail investors to get a bigger bite at this at some point. We at least know the demand will certainly be there, not necessarily the performance. And we've seen this with mega IPOs, usually out at the gate over the first few weeks and months. Not always a big return, but obviously that can smooth out over time. My question, though, for you, Dan, is that I understand this is a bet on Musk Inc. Largely, but there are a lot of people that are making a big bet as well on the promise of AI and the whole flywheel of AI as well. This is a little bit different than when Tesla went public, when they were pretty much the only game in town when it came to electric cars, at least that with the promise of being able to provide electric cars at scale. This is a crowded space, and there are a lot of big players that could very well do what SpaceX is doing. I don't necessarily mean we're talking about with the big rocket launches, but with regards to data compute capacity and everything that goes around that. I hate to use the word moat, but how much of a moat do you think SpaceX and Musk have in this world?
Yeah, well, you bring up great points. Obviously, space, that's their moat, right? In terms of everything that they've done foundationally in Starlink. But this is really more around data and AI.
And that's why it comes down to the XAI was so important in terms of SpaceX and why we ultimately believe will be around Tesla. Because look, if you look where OpenAI and Anthropic are relative to XAI, I mean, there's a lot of ground to make up. And as they laid out in their S1 in terms of the whole market opportunity, I mean, there's space, but this is much more of actually a data AI play than what I would call as a traditional space play.
Well, but it gets to this idea, and look, I know that the market for data compute is only going to continue to grow, and we were speaking a little bit earlier with Rich Claret over at PIMCO. He just put out their annual secular report, and they're talking a base case, basically around $2 trillion in spending per year on average for the next 5 years, and that's just for AI and energy grid stuff, not even all the ancillary stuff when it comes to space, et cetera. So if we do start to see those numbers, and assuming those numbers go up, how does that pie get split up? Do you think the hyperscalers will maybe get a little bit more piece of that, or is it just all going to be sort of, whoever can get a rocket into space and get those satellites and orbital data centers up there?
Well, I mean, that's one piece of it, but you see some of the deals with, with Google and others, because it's might be like data centers in space. That's not high in the sky. I mean, we're talking about something in the next 3 to 4 years that I think becomes realistic. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, in this fourth industrial revolution, you got to be able to see around corners, whether it's on the hyperscale, whether it's chips, whether what we're seeing in terms of industrial, second, third, fourth derivative. And that's essentially what's happening here. And I think if you go back over the decades, investors that were not able to see whether it was cloud, whether it was AI, whether it was just, really the growth of the internet on the consumer side, I think those, right now we're hitting one of those inflection points in the market.
Are y'all looking at Realtor.com without me?
Honey, mortgage money's the function, so use those drops, Scarlett and Paul, if you do not already.
I eat so many oranges, eat so many grapefruit. I think good on vitamin C. Vitamin D, different story.
Okay. Well, for on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Matt Piper, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Scarlett.
All right, Matt Piper, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Scarlett Bloom, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. We've got, as Matt was just reporting, a little bit of red and green on the screen. Let's put it that way. Let's take a look at some of the stocks on the move today. We can do that with Bloomberg News' Matt Griffin. Matt, what are you looking at today?
Well, of course, Paul, there's one stock that we're all thinking about, but it isn't trading yet. So another name I can offer you instead is Adobe, elsewhere in the tech complex. The stock down about 7.5%.
We're still waiting on SpaceX open here. Please go to my store, bud-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver drops in cherry flavor. It's great for the allergy season, the cold season, even cleaning around the home. And get the cleanse or Max 35. This will help to boost up your innate immune system. It will neutralize, help to improve the health of your oral cavity, help to improve the health of your oral pharynx, maintain a mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. Swoosh in your mouth, gargle about 20 or 30 seconds, and then swallow it. I've been doing this protocol for more than 6 years, every day. Now, if you're not feeling well or you have allergies, during that period of time, what you want to do is take a tablespoon, swoosh in your mouth, gargle, and then swallow. And what that's going to do is boost up that innate immune system and neutralize. So please go to my store, get the cleanse or the Max 35. And it's part of my anti-aging protocol. The reason why it works is really simple. If you're not sick as often, if you don't have allergies as often, your body doesn't age as fast. It's that simple. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver lozenges, the cleanse, and the Max 35. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Are plunging in advance of the SpaceX trading debut today. It's SpaceX's competitors or peers, I should say.
That could be a trade there. Matt Griffin, thanks so much. Appreciate that. For more conversations like this, subscribe to our Stock Movers Reports. Listen for 5-minute audio reports on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you listen. And then let's head down to Houston, Texas. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright speaking with Bloomberg Television anchor Anne-Marie Horder at the Bloomberg Energy Security Executive Briefing. Let's take a listen right now.
Blowing off nuclear bombs right now, let's just forget about it and move on. But he wasn't willing to do that. He said, we have to solve that problem. I'm not going to hand my successor a nuclear armed Iran. And so there's dialogue back. Of course, you know, they for 47 years, they are wedded to being to becoming nuclear armed, and for whatever crazy reason to export their Islamic revolution and change the whole world. Everyone converted or dead. It's an ideology that doesn't work well with other nations, with other people, and of course disastrous for the 90 million Iranians that live under that regime. So that's sort of the broader backdrop.
I guess it's just hard to understand is this a real inflection point, only because the president has said about 40 times since this conflict started that we were close to a peace deal, and then
Let's take a look at some of the other news here. Blockchain is coming, according to Senator, says $30 trillion could hit U.S. markets. Listen to Mario Bartiromo.
Here's how to go from $300 a month on AC to almost $0. We built this portable cooling system that can drop a room's temperature by up to 17 degrees in just 90 seconds.
Well, welcome back. Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong says he is sad to hear about how JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon feels about the Clarity Act. This after Jamie Dimon told me he's going to fight it 2 weeks ago. Watch this. Well, are you happy with the way the Clarity Act is turning out?
No, because it allows them to effectively pay interest on deposits, stable coins, or something like that, without the protection that they should have, and it doesn't do anything for AML and BSA. And there's almost no legal protections. So no, the banks will not accept it that way. And the ABA, the small banks, the credit unions, not just the big guys. I'm not worried about stablecoin, but if it happened, I'm telling you, I would have nothing to do with it, and it would eventually go up on its own. Okay, but that's my personal thing. But I do understand the concern of all the other banks. So,
well, the markup is coming. I mean, what are you going to do about it?
We'll fight it. If we lose, and we'll live.
Okay.
But it will be fought. This will not be. No one's going to bow down to this guy, okay, or that company. And he's the only one, and he's spending hundreds of millions of dollars in Washington this thing.
He said he's representing the whole industry. Armstrong maintaining the regulatory framework he claims will be good for the banks. More than 200 crypto companies and lobbying groups are now calling on the Senate to schedule a floor vote on the key digital asset legislation. Joining me now is South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. He's the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. Mr. Chairman, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Maria.
Obviously, people feel like the Senate's running out of time to get the Clarity Act passed before the August recess. What's your reaction to what Jamie Dimon just said, and what no doubt you've been hearing from other major banks?
Well, it looks like to me that Jamie and Brian might need to see some counseling together, because they're actually distracting from the actual main point. Jamie more than Brian, by the way. The fact of the matter is that even JP Morgan is now getting involved in stablecoins. Why? Because digital assets is a part of the future of finance. So every single industry will want to be a part of that, including banks. So what we're talking about today is how do we set the rules of the road so that we protect our consumers. Job one is making sure that consumers are protected. Job two, making it less expensive to do business in America and easier to do it 24/7. Blockchain and digital assets allows us to get there faster. It's coming, period.
Well, I mean, we were just talking with Michael Seelig, and, he made the point that we need the framework in place so that the business doesn't go offshore, right? So that we don't see a lot of these crypto companies go to other countries to actually do this. You've made this legislation a priority, and I want to get your take about that. How much do you believe will come into the U.S. once we do have the Clarity Act in place? How significant is the business if, in fact, those companies don't go offshore?
Some of it's estimated that the actual sector itself in industry is worth about $3 trillion now. I think it's going to $30 trillion in the next several years. The truth of the matter is that we can either lead in America or watch the dust from a distance. We're not going to do that. We're going to lead in America. Why? Because we're Americans. Maria, we have to make sure that we have an environment that is conducive for the brightest minds, the greatest thinkers, entrepreneurs to descend upon America to make sure that we are the economic financial capital of the world for another generation. Frankly, what we've already seen, Maria, with stable coins is that our dollar dominance is actually increasing. More than $300 billion of more activity around the world because of stable coins. And where is the activity happening? Around the dollar, because stable coins requires dollars or U.S. treasuries to back every single penny that you find in stablecoins. Really good news for America's dollar remaining the reserve currency of the world. And if you look into the future beyond that, single mothers like the one that raised me, people working paycheck to paycheck, democratization through digital assets will bring down the cost of transactions and speed up the time of delivery, so the banks and or anyone else is not holding your money and earning interest. You'll be able to earn that interest yourself. This is good news.
And thank you for keeping the dollar as one of the big priorities for you in terms of keeping everything in place to make sure it's dominant. Look, we've got breaking news on the screen right now, Senator.
Yes.
The European Central Bank just raised interest rates. They raised rates to 2.25%. It was expected. Most people did expect a hike from the ECB, but of course we know next week is Kevin Warsh's first Fed meeting. What are you expecting from the new chairman of the Federal Reserve?
I think why is probably as important as what. So what we saw this last report is that inflation ticked up to 4.2%, highest in 3 years. Last month it was 3.8. The month before that was 3.3. The trend is not going in the right direction. But Maria, one of the things it signals is resiliency in our economy, which is in fact good news. Because of Donald Trump, we have more Americans with more money in their pockets because we returned to them or kept in place a $5 trillion tax cut, and your tax return is up 11%. So there's more money to be spent on household necessities. So we're going to have to figure out what the hedge against inflation looks like. I believe that they will keep rates where they are next week and not increase them. At least that's my prayer. I think that's how it's going to work out, because ultimately the economy is healthy, it is strong, but we still see many headwinds, many challenges coming our way. So keeping rates where they are is probably the best thing to do from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, the good news about the economy has something to do with obviously a lot to do with what you all have done with the One Big Beautiful Bill. And that was so evident in the earnings period that we just came off of. But it also has to do with all this enormous money moving into AI. And there's some worry about that. You know, I mean, the Senate Banking Committee set to hold a hearing today on the advantages and implications of AI and its role in the American dream. Ranking member Elizabeth Warren invited NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang to testify, but he declined. But you've got people like Senator Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders saying we want a moratorium on AI. You've also got Scott Bessent calling an emergency meeting with the major banks saying, look, we need to get ahead of potential unpredictability from some of the AI, agentic AI part of this. So what are your thoughts on ensuring that we can, in fact, get ahead of potential bad actors when it comes to AI?
Well, one of the things I would suggest to my Democrat friends is that fear, the acronym false evidence appearing real, really does worry the American people. What they need more of is confidence in what's going to happen. We know artificial intelligence is coming. The number one objective we have is to protect our consumers and make sure they don't bear the burden of higher costs in electricity or water usage. That would be bad. But President Trump, once again, is ahead of the curve. He's already put in place an executive order that says, you use it, you pay for it. Data centers, period. Our president is working on behalf of folks who are struggling today to meet their obligations financially. Number two, we need to make sure that we protect the American worker and make sure they don't feel replaceable. How do we do that? by making sure that as production goes up, our workers are the reasons why they're being more productive. Good, hard workers plus artificial intelligence should make us more productive. That means incomes will rise and we will have a better future. There's a lot we have to untangle along the way, and today is the first of many hearings that we will have in the banking committee so that we can understand that. Maria, you made one really important point. Mythos, which is, I think it's from Anthropic. This is an important part of what we learned about what was possible in deceiving and disguising attacks. We're going to make sure that we understand the implications of this technology.
All right, breaking news that the U.S. Energy Secretary is being interviewed by Bloomberg, and he mentioned that currently out of the Persian Gulf, there's 7 million barrels a day flowing out. And this is part of the reason why you're starting to see the futures market for Brent crude and WTI drifting down. Now today it's trading at 87.59. It's testing that 87 barrier. We'll see. If it stays below, then we are establishing a new trading range of about $79 to about $87 a barrel.
And we're going to go into it with our eyes wide open and create a regulatory environment that is helpful for American companies, American workers, and the future of the country. The one thing we all agree upon, left and right, is that China will not lead in AI. The stack will be built on by American companies, American products, and America's vision for the future of the world, and not China's.
Yeah, and you've made that a priority, and we talk about it all the time.
Yes.
So
There is a concern that artificial intelligence is going to destroy aggregate demand because people are not going to have as many jobs. It's not a foregone conclusion that it's going to be positive for the market. I suspect that it's going to be a mosaic. Some industries or some businesses will get rid of employees. Others will be able to leverage their employees in conjunction with AI. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. You can get it in powdered form or the veggie cap form. I prefer taking the powdered form, but either one will work for you. By taking a good probiotic, you're going to improve your gut biome, improve the health of your skin. You're even going to improve your brain function. You'll be able to sleep better, get rid of that brain fog. You're going to be detoxifying your central nervous system and consolidate memory when you have good sleep. And a good gut biome will help to get into those cycles of deep sleep and REM sleep that you need. Now, by also improving your gut biome, you're improving the mucosal layer, you're strengthening the lining of the gut, you're improving your immune system within the gut, you're reducing the chances of food allergies by having a better gut biome. You're revving up your metabolism. You'll have weight loss if you have a good gut biome. Now, you should be also drinking filtered water and staying away from processed foods to help with populating your gut. And eating, balanced diet. Some carbs, some protein, some fatty acids. But it's really important to have a good gut biome. Good health starts at the gut, and your overall health will improve. Your skin will improve. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the probiotics, either the veggie cap form or the powder form. Good gut health starts at the gut. All right, let's continue on. Let's listen to CNBC talking about SpaceX IPO.
Right now, Ben Harrison, he's Nasty Venture Capital founder. Good morning to you. Let's talk about that. How important is how this all goes today in terms of what comes next?
I think it's absolutely critical. If SpaceX doesn't fly, you're going to see a huge stall for everything else. And it could put a huge show on the market. If it pops,
everybody is just popping champagne and wanting to push their stuff out. We'll see a tremendous amount of IPOs, not just OpenAI and Anthropic, but a lot of other great companies.
Do you see a way in the short term for the stock not to pop? And the reason I ask that, but the reason I ask is if you have these index funds, which in the next 5 days are going to be buying, rotating out of whatever they have to get cash to actually buy this. Walk through the permutations of how you see that.
So the two best reasons you won't see downward pressure are one, the early listing in major indexes and people's need to place those in their ETFs, et cetera. The other is the sort of fangirl effect, and that includes people that I think are phenomenally intelligent, like Don Barron, and obviously Blackstone announced they're putting a $5 billion check. But there is so much. This IPO basically rhymes with Facebook's. Facebook had a visionary leader that everybody wanted to bank who insisted on a price. At that point, it was $100 billion. Elon's done the same thing. They did it without price discovery. The opening was delayed pretty significantly, and I suspect this one will be as well, as market makers tried to match. That offering did not do well for quite a while. It did come back. Look, I am a long-term buyer of SpaceX. I think it's going to be a phenomenal company. But there are so many systematic issues right now that I think are going to put pressure on the stock. I have no idea how many people that wanted allocations want for a flip. Every banker tells you they're going to issue long-term holders. Our bankers told us the same thing. But then people are out there selling from the opening bell. So I think there's a lot that reminds me of what happened before, and I think there's a pretty good chance. I'd say at best it's a coin flip. It's not what the poly markets the world are saying, but I think it's a coin flip whether this ends up or down.
Well, you just said you want to be a long-term holder. Does that mean that you plan to wait because you think there's going to be another opportunity to get it at a better price?
Absolutely. I mean, look, even if it holds today or pops, the lockup expiry, I know they have a staggered lockup and lots of different pieces to that. But in 6 months, when everybody gets released, I don't see that being a great day. So that could be a great buying opportunity. But the people that are going to make really good money here are the long-term holders, the Buffett-style mindsets, the Ron Barons of the world, where they're going to buy and they're going to hold and they're not going to worry about the vicissitudes of the market. But the problem is I have no idea how the Robinhood bros of the world are going to handle this if it doesn't go well. If it trades down, it's going to turn into a pretty aggressive downward spiral, I would assume.
And do you think that's something that takes down not just IPOs more broadly, meaning the Anthropics and OpenAIs, but the broader market?
Well, I think it puts a pause on the IPOs that people are so excited about. We've talked about this before. Bankers are motivated by greed and fear. Now, here, greed equaled, as we just heard, $500 million of fees, not too shabby. The fear is that if your clients lose money too many times, they don't buy your offerings anymore. And so if clients take a bath on this one, I'm not sure how quickly bankers are going to be willing to push out the next one. Whether the broader market takes a hit, I don't know. I mean, people, quote unquote, rotated out of tech to be able to have money to buy into SpaceX, or that was the theory. So maybe they move right back into it. There's no better category to invest in. I mean, it's not like you're going to say, oh, what's as good as tech? No, oil and gas? No. Tech's where the future is and where all the great growth is. These companies are phenomenal.
When you think about some of these...
Electricity is the biggest energy theme in the 21st century.
We really are entering a new age. You need to balance supply and demand.
When you think about some of the incentives, alignments and misalignments in terms of how IPOs like this go today, you look at the retail piece of it, the 20% instead of 30%. You got a lot of, we talked about BlackRock, taking a big piece of this. I imagine, when you take a big piece on one end, you're also hoping to get something on the other end. You got JPM and Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. How should we try to understand sort of the behind the scenes of all this?
Well, another thing that gives me a lot of pause is the significant amount of retail exposure. Not just that it was made available to retail, I like that. I think it is very fair to give people the opportunity to participate in IPOs. In the old days, people would literally open multiple accounts with multiple. They would go to Goldman or whichever firm they'd go to, and they'd open like 12 accounts, and they'd ask all of them for an allocation on IPO because IPO would pop and they'd sell immediately. But I do like the idea of giving retail buyers the opportunity to buy in. What I find disheartening was when one of the major banks announced that they would drop the minimum threshold of assets from $500,000 down to $2,000. So So all of a sudden you're basically saying, you know, as long as you've got two sticks you can rub together long enough to build a fire and then sell hot dogs for a week, you can be in the SpaceX IPO. That to me is a pretty dangerous thing, because I'm not convinced those are long-term holders. I think they might be more motivated by what they perceive as a quick hit. And Tesla's had a great run for a long time, so you would assumably see people from Tesla coming into this offering. But the retail component of this is something I think adds a level of variability that is pretty hard to predict. And you've seen that in the past, right? You've seen stocks, you've seen the meme stocks move like crazy off of pure retail.
Where do you land though then on, because there's another retail element of it, but the NASDAQ and its decision to include this in the exchange, I mean, or in their index immediately, I imagine that means that Anthropic and OpenAI would also have that opportunity.
Well, I mean, look, I think that one's pretty transparent. They needed to win the deal away from the New York Stock Exchange. I've done an IPO on the NASDAQ, I've done an IPO on the New York Stock Exchange. It's a lot more pomp and circumstance in the New York Stock Exchange. If you were just going for the building and the wonderful flair of the first day, it's a fascinating thing to do. But when they put you on the short, you know, on the NASDAQ 100, that helps. So that to me was just a pay to play. Whether the others will get it or not, it certainly breaks precedent and therefore makes it easier for the next person to negotiate for it. Same with the banking fees, right? These banking fees are a much smaller percentage than they usually get, but on an absolute amount of money, it's still stunningly huge. So look, once you do something for one person, it always becomes easier for the second person to insist.
Pay to play, that's typically not a great phrase. Are you surprised? We have not had a bigger conversation in terms of, from a regulatory perspective, about this new approach.
I mean, I don't know why it would percolate up to that level. When I say pay to play, it's negotiation. You're trying to win the deal. I mean, you know, that was one of the costs of getting this deal done. That's what they paid to get the deal done. That's what they paid to be the player that became the exchange that this trades on. And I don't see anything untoward about that. This is not a, you know, whatever. Remember, in Trump won, there was no whatever it was, tit for tat. It's not. These are not backroom dealings. I mean, it's all out there.
I think Ben. I think the question is there's two constituencies in this case. There's the shareholders of the NASDAQ on one end, the shareholders of NASDAQ, not the index, on one end, that benefit by having this IPO on the exchange. And then there are the implications for price discovery and what ultimately happens to the investor and the investor class on the other, which has to do with the index. And serving both masters may not be the same thing.
Oh, they're totally different. So the price discovery, the absence of price discovery, is one of the number one reasons I'm fearful this price doesn't hold, at least not for the near term. It probably comes back when it gets out of the index. Yeah. But the shareholders of the NASDAQ should be super happy. You know, like when you take a company public, you pay a per share fee to the exchange you trade on. So this is an enormous revenue generator for NASDAQ. It's an enormous point of pride. This is going to be quite useful to them. So if I'm a shareholder of NASDAQ, I'm very happy. But that's a totally separate thing from being a shareholder in SpaceX and what happens from it.
Fair enough.
Electricity is the biggest energy theme in the 21st century.
Let's see if we can.
They started very early, and so it might be hard to catch them. Ask what a shot was.
I just want to point out that we've had two indications in the last couple of minutes, down to 172 and then 170. So right now, SpaceX shares are indicated to open at 170. That price coming down from 175, Lauren.
Interesting. Well, it's still a really high share price, I have to admit. I mean, and one thing I keep saying is that it really is hard to understate the value that SpaceX provides to not only the commercial space industry, but the U.S. government. They are perhaps NASA's most important launch provider at the moment, and also just partner in general. Without SpaceX, we would not be able to get humans into orbit from, or to the International Space Station from U.S. soil. And then on top of that, they are also one of a few elite launch providers for the Defense Department, for the Pentagon. So, you know, it's that kind of value is hard to quantify.
Well, they do bring in 70% of the revenue for the whole company. I don't think anyone has a problem with SpaceX itself. I think there's more problem with the whole AI add-on.
Absolutely, and you know, I'll admit I was a bit surprised at this new approach. For much of SpaceX's history, Elon and Gwen have said, you know, we are not going to go public until we're regularly flying people to Mars. At least Elon said until the Mars vehicle is flying regularly. So maybe we can subjectively say that these test flights, you know, qualify there. So yes, it definitely is a big new direction for the company that has been pretty consistent on what it's been founded for. So it really is just going to be up to people if they think that, you know, SpaceX can replicate the success that they've had with their launch business, but for AI.
And the U.S. government customer A, I believe is how I put it there just a few moments ago. Lauren Rush, thank you very much. Great to see you here in New York. SpaceX's debut is shining the spotlight on the growing space economy, but building a space economy takes more than just rockets. Interstellar Lab is working on technology designed to grow food and support life on space stations, the moon, and eventually Mars. Founder and CEO Barbara Belvisi joins us now. Barbara, great to have you with us. You heard what Lauren was talking about just a moment ago. I'm curious what this ecosystem looks like broadly. This is a day on which we are focused on one company in particular, not to belabor the metaphor, but if there were a solar system, SpaceX seems very much to be at the center of it, and so much is orbiting around it. What is that community like? How much opportunity is there as you see it?
Well, I mean, it's a very important day for the entire industry. You know, we're proving to investors that a company that started with a mission to make life multiplanetary has been proven to be able to, you know, generate revenue, go public, satisfy investors, and make people very rich by investing in this company. So it's a shifting point in the space industry because there's going to be a pre-SpaceX IPO and a post-SpaceX IPO for all the startups ecosystem. For us, what it means, we're a big group of people working on the technology that will help life become multiplanetary, and it goes through, you know, orbital space station to the moon, the circular economy, and how we bring all of that onto Mars. So,
yes, how does it work? You're identifying foods that will survive, or you're creating foods and other materials, and is it just for human consumption?
So initially we started 7 years ago from NASA Ames in San Francisco. We worked on a conceptual lunar greenhouse that can be applied in the future for Mars. And of course, when I started, I have a financial background. You know, people were like, who are you going to sell this greenhouse to? There is nobody on the moon and neither on Mars. I was like, well, we're going to spin up the technology and find application on Earth. So from the lunar greenhouse concept that we developed, we did a technology transfer, and we built terrestrial greenhouses that are very efficient and that we sell to ingredient company. Our biggest customer will be L'Oreal, so a cosmetic company buying our greenhouse, we sell the equipment, they pay us services to operate the system. That's how we make money. Then we keep on going with the NASA program. You know, we're very dependent on the rockets, on the landers, on what's NASA direction. And so, you know, we've been for the past 7 years, people were like, you're a little bit early on the market. Well, it feels like now I'm not early, I'm actually right on time because this is about to happen with the moon base. And so, yeah, so we have the infrastructure, the equipment, and in terms of selecting the crops, where we build a database of over 150 different species, we know how to grow, you know, from microgreens to perennial to dwarf trees, and being able to provide a very diverse diet to astronauts in space. One part that is important about the greenhouse is not only about the food, it's really about the oxygen and the CO2. Because with 50 square meter of controlled environment greenhouse, you can actually produce all the calories that are needed for a human to live in space.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ashwagandha root. This will help to control your blood glucose levels. Also, it'll help to bring down cortisol levels. This will bring down inflammation, boost up your immune system, help with your cardiovascular system. Lignans. Lignans helps to bring down inflammation, soaks up free radicals, boosts your immune system and endocrine system. By taking this, you'll also notice that you have less inflammation with your joints, especially with arthritis. By taking lignans regularly, you're helping with brain function because you're keeping that inflammation down. You're soaking up those free radicals. You're helping your cardiovascular system by preventing plaque formation. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the lignans. Again, this will help to bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals. Super important as part of a anti-aging protocol. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg here. Problems.
Excitement about technology and innovation, and this is helping to define that.
Absolutely. We're going to see how this sets the tone for Anthropic and OpenAI's IPOs, and it's going to be this banner year of mega tech IPOs. Christina, I have to admit that I'm kind of tired and exhausted of the SpaceX hype machine. I kind of just want to get past this first day of trading and move forward, right? Get to 6 months in, 1 year later. What will matter in 6 months' time or 1 year's time when it comes to a company like SpaceX, which is full of promise, full of ambition, full of superlatives, but at the end of the day, this is not a free cash flow positive story either, and it's not making money.
Well, this is not just SpaceX. This is a lot of technology companies that have very stretched valuations. And so much will be dictated by the monetary policy environment, the overarching capacity for investors to tolerate high valuations if we're to see yields go up on the long end. We know that historically, higher yields have exerted downward pressure on equities, particularly long duration assets like tech stocks. And so it is something to keep in the back of our minds. There is a lot of exuberance now. Some might argue there's a bit of irrational exuberance in here. And we just have to recognize that the macro environment may dictate the fortunes of these stocks come 6 months, 12 months from now, especially if we have a Fed that is more aggressive in tightening than is expected.
So, Christine, if we can step back from the SpaceX deal, what's kind of your broader market call here when you think about global allocations?
So let me start by saying geopolitics doesn't matter to markets until it's all that matters to markets. And I think we're in the stage right now where it really doesn't matter. And for the most part, markets are naively optimistic. If we hear that we're close to a deal between the U.S. and Iran, markets believe it and move up. And I think there is a willful ignoring of some of the great risks that the economy, the global economy, and the U.S. economy are facing right now, in terms of the potential for significantly higher energy prices, gas prices in particular, that are going to be very problematic for consumers. We've heard oil execs warn about that very recently. And it's not just oil and natural gas. We have to worry about a number of other commodities that are impacted by the conflict in the Middle East, including helium. I think not enough attention is being given to this, but about a third of the global supply of helium comes from Qatar. And we've seen facilities hit in Iran strikes in mid-March. So even if the Strait of Hormuz were to open up tomorrow, we would not be back to anytime soon. It would take probably more than a year to rebuild. We would not be back to capacity on helium. And that is critical and not substitutable in the semiconductor manufacturing process. All of this is to say that I think there's some very real vulnerabilities as we look at assets across the globe. And what I would say is it's very important to be diversified in this environment. And it's also important to be thinking about the downside risks, having exposure to areas like European equities that don't have much exposure to tech.
All right, good stuff. Christina Hooper, Chief Global Market Strategist from Man Group, joining us from Connecticut. Thank you so much. Great speaking with you, and have a fantastic weekend. We go back to SpaceX. I know I just said that I'm a little tired of waiting for this to begin trading, but we are still waiting. And the NASDAQ has told us about a half hour ago that it anticipates the IPO to open for trading shortly. That is yet to happen. So we're going to check in right now with Yahara Anand. She is our Bloomberg Television reporter joining us right now from the NASDAQ. Yahara, tell us a little bit more about what the anticipation is like there at the NASDAQ and the pricing of the IPO and how it's likely to open.
Hi, Scarlett. Well, there was a lot of fanfare this morning. The president of SpaceX was here along with the Dina Friedman of the NASDAQ and the CFO of SpaceX, while Elon Musk was over in Texas, but they were enthusiastic here. They had Rocket Man playing in the background. I will say things have quieted down. There are still crowds outside, but there is still major anticipation of this across Wall Street. And we've gotten several indications throughout the morning of what this will open at. The latest points to an opening of $168.75 a share, down from earlier indications near 175, but at 168.75 cents, that's still roughly 25% above the IPO price and would give SpaceX a valuation of $2.2 trillion. That would make it more valuable than the likes of Meta, Saudi Aramco, and even Tesla itself. As I said, we are still waiting for the first trade. I will say I'm seeing some movement in the background, so maybe it could happen soon.
So it's interesting here. We know IPO market's really heating up, and it's really heating up between the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ for some of these listings. What are the folks at NASDAQ saying? Because this will be the biggest IPO of all time. That's quite a feather in the cap for NASDAQ.
Exactly, and it's the first one to come out of the gates out of the three big ones that we've been anticipating: SpaceX, OpenAI, and Anthropic. And what NASDAQ has really been doing is aggressively courting these mega IPOs. They want to get them here. And earlier this year, NASDAQ, we know, did change its rules to create a fast-track path for the path into the NASDAQ 100, allowing a newly public company like SpaceX to join the index potentially in 15 days. So we could see those passive flows in that time frame. And it is something that will impact the markets for weeks to come, not just today, but obviously all the enthusiasm is today since it is launch day.
Okay, so Yahara, how are people talking about the lockup period expiration? Because you've got the fact that there's not a big float in this IPO, but this listing is going to make a lot of people a lot of money once they can get out of the stock.
Exactly, and I will say that is why there was so much excitement here at the NASDAQ, because you had all these investors standing behind the president, Gwynne Shotwell, and the CFO. And these are the people who have been with SpaceX from the start when it was, it's still an unprofitable company, but when it was a tiny company with a big vision and a big leader, So there was a lot of excitement because of that. We know these folks are going to make a lot of money. I'm not saying that Peter Thiel was here, but we know that his fund could make tens of billions of dollars. So that is where the enthusiasm is coming from. All that liquidity will now flow back to venture capital, back to the private market. So it's an exciting day for those who bet on Elon Musk at the start.
All right, Yahara, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Yahara Anand, she is a TV reporter for Bloomberg News. She is at the NASDAQ here where we await the opening of this IPO. Again, $135 was the IPO price, indicating higher.
It's taking forever for SpaceX to open up in the market here. I'm waiting. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. The Boomer Boost is a great way to get the multivitamins and other nutrients to slow down the aging process. You should be taking this every day. Now, what this will do is help with brain function. It'll bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, help with your cardiovascular health, help with musculature, help with your metabolism, increase your energy levels. And you take this on a regular basis, like every day, you will notice that you are aging slower. Now you stack that with a holistic approach, drinking filtered water, staying away from processed foods, controlling your sugar intake, doing cardiovascular and fitness training and resistance training, stretching, balancing exercises, mindfulness or spirituality, learning new things. When you do this in a holistic way and you take Boomer Boost, you're going to slow down the aging process. Now, if you stack it with a lot of the other different things that I have on my store, different supplements that I have on my store, you're going to get the synergistic benefit. Because the whole point of slowing down the aging process and boosting up that immune system is targeting what are some of the pressure points of aging. One pressure point is lack of energy. Your mitochondria is getting weaker. Oh, you want to boost that up. This will help to boost up that health of the mitochondria, increase the energy levels. When you're older, you have more inflammation. You want to bring that inflammation down. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. I also have vitamin D3, which is a multi-purpose supplement. Vitamin D3 is a cofactor for gene expression, so it's really important for your cells. Most people don't have enough vitamin D, so please go to my store and get this supplement. If you have the common cold, vitamin D3 helps to get rid of cells that are infected. It helps cells to go into apoptosis if they need to die off. Vitamin D3 helps with bone density by absorbing calcium and helping deposit that into your bone matrix. And vitamin D3 helps with your cardiovascular health. And when you have a better cardiovascular system, you have better blood flow, including to your brain, which will help with brain function. So please go to my store and get the vitamin D3 and the Boomer Boost. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video.
Is for SpaceX and for the industries, the company and Elon identifying the $29 trillion total addressable market. Do we have any idea where that number really comes from?
Well, thanks for having me on again. It's a huge number, it really is. I don't know if AM can really add up the numbers. I'm not quite sure exactly where that comes from, but I think the thesis is what SpaceX is eventually going to become. It really wants to be the infrastructure that's running all industry, all markets. So if you think about it, the internet in the 90s, they're really trying to create the backbone for AI infrastructure for this century. So what they're looking to do is put a lot of AI infrastructure in place, lots of chips, lots of robotics, not just for their own use for SpaceX and not just for Tesla, but they're looking to do that for all industries. So if you have a long-term view on AI chips and infrastructure and compute, then the argument is that all industries would benefit from that.
Of course, SpaceX has become a government contractor. It's done a lot of the work that NASA used to do. So one of the addressable markets is the US government, and that's a big customer. How can we quantify just how big of an opportunity that would be going forward?
So I think it is pretty big. I mean, if you think about the relationship with NASA as well, NASA's focus is shifting to more exploration, but from a government standpoint, it's definitely been more on the kind of national defense, golden dome type strategy. As long as the US particularly wants to be the dominant force and has recognized through Space Force that much of the military will be guided through satellites and that technology, I think it's basically they're a prime for the US government.
So how do you guys think about it? I mean, how does this relate to your company and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so we're really focused on the private sector. So we're helping space tech companies who are not yet public commercialize, so raise capital, find customers, focus on revenue. And the thing that's really important there is with what the SpaceX is doing, is it is going to generate a lot of liquidity in the marketplace. So as people spin out from SpaceX, go do their own thing, it's drawing attention from private equity and venture capital into the market. That's going to draw a lot of capital in. So from our standpoint, it's going to increase this focus on the opportunity. But our argument is, though, that it has to be on the basis that there's real customers for those space technologies. And our thesis is that aside from governments, and NASA who are doing space exploration, that's actually in non-space industries. So financial markets and global logistics, agriculture, pharmaceutical, that's the market there. And that remains an opportunity for a lot of these innovative companies. I think SpaceX is more of an infrastructure play for those other markets.
It's an infrastructure play for now. It could also become an electric vehicle company soon as well, or that'll be kind of brought into its orbit, because there's a lot of talk about how Elon Musk might combine SpaceX with Tesla. That just becomes another kind of company then, and not really comparable to what you do.
Yes. I think there's a couple of things there. With SpaceX and Tesla relationship, one of the ideas originally that he wanted to get into EVs is ultimately he wants to be able to have vehicles up in Mars. For that, you need electric vehicles and power. So that's part of his broad, interplanetary species strategy there, right? But when it comes back to what's back on Earth, it really is about building infrastructure and providing things that are used or created for space, but used back down on Earth. And I think there's enough of an alternate market to SpaceX to allow those things to happen. So an example would be the International Space Station is coming down in a couple of years, and there's going to be new commercial space stations going up, which is going to allow drug research and other types of research and in-orbit manufacturing to happen. That is going to be core in other parts of the infrastructure that the SpaceX will not serve.
How's the capital raising out there other than SpaceX for companies that want to do space-based businesses?
It's actually been very healthy over the last number of years. I mean, you could argue it's been quite healthy over the last 15 years. But the last couple of years, there's definitely been an inflow of private capital. It's not for things that are like rockets and hardware and satellites. It's traditionally not been a venture model.
Right.
But I think they're starting to realize that this is a play towards more venture-like businesses that can run on that infrastructure.
You talked about how this will create a liquidity event, this IPO. Yeah. It's going to make a lot of people rich. We talk a lot about the SpaceX current employees and former employees. If they do become very wealthy and decide to step away and stop working, they may go off and start their own company as well. Yeah. This creates this large ecosystem. Do you have any sense of timing around how this plays out?
That's a hard one, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of lockups in there and a lot of people looking to fulfill the SpaceX mission. But I think certainly over the next couple of years, you're going to see a lot of that activity happening.
Absolutely. All right, Ross, thanks for joining us. Ross Hamilton, Chief Operating Officer of Space Network. Red headline crossing the terminal that is moving the markets. Iran's Arachi says U.S.-Iran MOU, quote, has never been closer. We've got the S&P lifting higher on that. We've got oil trading low, so we'll keep an eye on that. For our listeners in the U.S., a reminder, you can listen to us via satellite radio on Sirius XM channel 121.
All right. Because of that news that just popped up, the oil market is trading just below $85 a barrel per WTI. The equity market is trading at 7,435. I still have a 7,800 to maybe 8,000 year-end target for the S&P 500. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the resveratrol. This will help with your basal layer for your skin, help with youthful gene expression. As you get older, you methylate genes. By taking resveratrol, you're slowing down that methylation. In addition, resveratrol soaks up free radicals, helps the health of the mitochondria so you have more energy. And resveratrol gets rid of cells that are in senescence. It stacks really well with C60. So take the resveratrol. Good night formula. Take it every night. It has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. It allows you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. So you're consolidating memory, detoxifying your central nervous system, and you'll be well rested. By having good sleep regularly, you are slowing down the aging process and improving brain function. So please go to my store and get the Goodnight Formula. And you can stack it with the resveratrol each day. All right, so you take the Goodnight Formula at night, you take the resveratrol in the morning. And this will help to slow down the aging process. I also have a great product that will help to relieve pain. If you have a tension headache, a bruise, a sprain, pulled muscle, or even arthritis, apply super strong relief topically in the area of the pain, and it will eliminate the pain or mitigate the pain within 90 seconds. So please go to my store, get the super strong relief. It is a very high quality product. So if you have that arthritic pain, apply it around that joint topically, and it'll help to relieve it. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
So Ron, possible truce has restored a more constructive backdrop for markets just before Elon Musk's big moment. To the big board we go, everything is up. The S&P up 0.6% or 43 points. The Dow is up above 1%. 520 points. The NASDAQ is up 0.3%. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down fractionally at 1206.41. The 2-year yield is up about 1 basis point. The 10-year yield is up 1 point as well. Oil prices are at their lowest since the early days of the Iran war on hopes of this peace deal. Brent down $89 a barrel, WTI at $84. Back to SpaceX, of course, this question: will OpenAI and Anthropic have a similar type of welcoming to the public world? Justice Parmar is with Fortuna Investments.
I think it's going to be an interesting, experiment of sorts. Never been done before. You want to be out early. I think Elon's done a great job of really pushing his team and his crew to get this stock out early because you're cleaning a lot of money out of the market. And so as the IPOs continue to stack on, you start to inherently develop risk, because if one of them starts to trade underwater, it's going to have a follow-over effect on the one preceding that one.
Well, have you questioned just how rich a trillionaire is? Over a 100-year lifetime, guys, it would equal spending $27,000 a day. That's a lot on DoorDash or something like that. As for Elon Musk, with the money, he could fund 68 U.S. election cycles or buy every car maker in Europe, Japan, and the U.S. It's a lot of money. Yep. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Matt Piper, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Scarlett.
All right, Matt, thanks so much. Appreciate that. Matt Piper, stocks definitely turning higher, as Matt was reporting on the back of that Iranian news, saying that a deal is pretty darn close. Let's see where some individual stocks are on the move today. We can do that. We're joined by Bloomberg's Avalon Purnell. She's an equity reporter for Bloomberg News. Avalon, what are you looking at today?
We have to start off with Adobe. That's currently falling about 6.7% now to hit its lowest intraday level since 2018. That's ticker ADBE. And that's after the company announced the departure of its CFO just months after the CEO also announced plans to step aside. The news also comes as Adobe reported a second quarter beat, but gave a full year forecast that fell a little short of expectations.
It looks like SpaceX is going to be
amid this transition. Evercore writing that the sentiment is unlikely to turn positive until a new management team is in place.
Oh boy, so we could be waiting for a while there. Okay, next up.
Lennar, that's ticker LEN, currently dipping about 3.7%. That's after the home builders delivery forecast for the third quarter fell short of expectations. Management again calling out to continuing pressure from high interest rates and geopolitical uncertainty, which is obviously spurring some customers to hold back on purchases. Truist also writing that while the results were fairly disappointing, it was somewhat encouraging that the results did not include a margin breakdown. Also worth noting that their peer, KB Home, called out to similar concerns last quarter, and they will be reporting June 23rd.
I mean, interest rates higher. The 30-year mortgage, that can't be helping. 6.5% for 30-year mortgage.
Exactly.
All right, so there you go. I'm not refinancing the mortgage on the Jersey Shore compound yet. Give us one more here.
Medline, MDLN, currently slipping about 2.3%. That's after the medical supplier suffered another setback from a fire at a distribution facility, clearing, expecting some short-term financial impact, since at a minimum, this is going to be taking a distribution facility offline. But that's not the only hardship that Medline has faced recently. Just last week, the FDA sent them a warning letter for several contamination incidents at a manufacturing facility. And now that company's stock is down about 12% since its debut as last year's biggest IPO.
Oh, I like the way that you ended that. And it comes full circle, right? I was just going to say, this was a big IPO when it came out. And that's a reminder that, you know, at least in the first year, a lot of the IPOs don't pan out the way you expect.
Yeah, that's a big risk, is look to float, you know, $1 gajillion over the space next year. Avalon Purnell, thanks so much for your appreciate that. Avalon is a equities reporter for Bloomberg News. And for more conversations like this, subscribe to our Stock Movers Reports. Listen for 5-minute auto reports on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen here. I'm looking at my SpaceX quote here, using the BQ function, the Bloomberg quote. That gives you tons of information, including where this thing is indicated pre-market. I ain't got nothing here. So
I know, it says IPO positioning window started.
Yes, exactly. So there was some reporting I saw on a Bloomberg News that 162 would be the initial indication, or the latest indication here. Let's go to George Ferguson here. He's been tasked to lead the research efforts here, involving lots of the analysts at Bloomberg Intelligence, because this is a technology play, it's an AI play, it's a rocket ship play. You got to have some experts, and fortunately Bloomberg does for all of those businesses. George, what do you think the buyer of a SpaceX, what do you think the buyer of a SpaceX share, what is he or she thinking here when they place that order?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think most of them are believers in Elon Musk, believers in his vision of the future and his ability to get things done, because I think you got to be a big believer to buy in it at these valuations. So that's why I think you saw so much of the IPO get shunted into the retail side of the world, and because I think that's where you'll see a lot of support and buy into that vision.
It feels like the SpaceX IPO is a real beast. I mean, you look at the superlatives surrounding it. It's the biggest IPO ever. It'll be the first company to move people to Mars. It's going to mint the world's first trillionaire. I almost said billionaire. And I had to correct myself.
I know. You have to.
And this is kind of the point, right, George? I mean, this is the Elon Musk formula. Create an entirely new category and then, you know, claim leadership and set the standard and, you know, make everyone follow in your footsteps. If that's the case, how does someone analyze a company like this? Because whatever you do, he's going to come back with, well, it's never been done before, so you can't, you know, compare it to anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's extremely hard. But I think when you look at it, I think we do understand pretty well with the launch business as it stands today. We understand the connectivity business, the satellite business pretty well. And I think the big variable here again is that AI business, and it's a variable out there for a number of other companies. But look, I think launch, we saw some 76% of the launches were primarily for Starlink. So when we think about the demand for launch in the future, look, I think there'll be more constellations that go up, but I don't think there's going to be more than 5 or 6 LEO constellations in the next couple of decades, and they're the ones that use a lot of satellites, that's sort of 10,000 plus kind of constellations. And I think of those 5 or 6, I think you're going to see 2 US are kind of, Starlink, and they're probably Amazon LEO. I think Europe might want one of their own. I'm sure the Chinese want a couple of their own. Maybe India gets in this game. I don't think anybody else's constellation is going to get launched on SpaceX launches, right? So I think it's going to be, even I think Amazon LEO is going to be launched largely on Blue Origin rockets as they get that going. So I think we're kind of looking at space kind of a flattish, maybe a slow growth kind of business as they do government work and things like that. And the connectivity business, that's all about, that's data, broadband data, that's direct to cell communications. We kind of understand that too. We have terrestrial providers. If you're in a big population center, they're going to do it better than SpaceX is going to do, given latency of going to a satellite, problems of being in buildings. But there are very important areas of the world that need that connectivity to a satellite to stay on the web and connected. And that will get better over time. But I think that's, maybe it's we're seeing sort of 20-ish% growth in the last couple of years, but Some of the metrics are coming down on the amount each subscriber spends. It's decently profitable. It's not wildly profitable. So to me, everything shifts to AI, right? It's a big bet on data centers, putting them into the sky, putting them into orbit. Where you probably be able to do it cheaper, cool it cheaper, power it easier, and then we'll stream data up to satellites, and Grok will help us figure out what to do in the future. And that's kind of to me the big vision.
Yeah, I'm looking at just kind of where the revenue comes from, George, just on the trailing 12-month basis. Round numbers, 11 billion from the connectivity business, 4 billion from the space business. And then at the bottom is AI at 3 billion of revenue. But when you think about a company that's going to be valued at least 95 times revenue, it seems like the buyer today is saying, I'm putting my money on this AI thing because I think that's going to be something just astronomical. I guess it's the AI play that kind of gets you to where you need to go for if you're a long-term investor.
Yeah, I think if you look at some of the recent deals cut with Anthropic, right? So that's $1.25 billion a month. I guess as long as they keep signing that agreement, you're going to see that AI revenue jump up pretty dramatically here over the next year and years, right? So I think when we look at sort of what we think is going to be at the end of 2026, we think it's going to be a 14 billion connectivity business and a 14 billion rev AI business. And I think one of the interesting things we saw is SpaceX built Colossus 1 and Colossus 2, the two big data centers down Memphis, Tennessee area. They did it in existing buildings so they could get it up and running very quickly. It's sort of a typical Elon Musk way. He's looking to drive down the cost quickly. And it's just, that's smart for any business person. Put a lot of capacity online. Now he has the opportunity to sell some of that to Anthropic. I think Google's in there too. So you're going to see that AI, revenue line drive up, but they spend a lot of money to keep that going, right? I think they're going to consume even more than the revenue they bring in. And there's like $4, $5, $6 billion deficits in that operating profit for that business. So you've got to find a way to power all that investment you need. This IPO is about, we're going to invest a lot of that money into data centers, and we'll invest some of it into Starship because we think long-term is going to be easier to make those data centers in space. It'll be cheaper. And so that's where a lot of this money goes. That's the bet.
Okay, so there's a lot of need for capital, and we know that's the case, and this IPO gets them there. I guess the big question is how many more times they'll tap the public markets, whether it's for equity or for debt. George, thank you so much. George Ferguson, our senior aerospace analyst here at Bloomberg Intelligence. We're going to head over now, back over to Houston, because our Anne-Marie Horjern, Bloomberg Television anchor, is sitting down right now with the CEO of Chevron, Mike Wirth. Let's listen in.
Seemed kind of crazy that you were even headquartered there at one point?
Well, I don't think in the beginning it made a lot of sense. I mean, we made the first commercial discovery in California in Pico Canyon in 1879, and we built our first refinery there in Northern California. Second refinery was built. The refinery was called El Segundo. It was the second refinery. It's now a city that's named after our refinery. So the state grew up around us more than us going to the state, and so we're part of the state's history. And for an awful long time, California was a big producer. It was one of the biggest producers in the world at one point, and we're an integral part of the economic story in California. Things have evolved, obviously, but it made sense for a long time. It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, so we're going to start with more so the news of the day and what's going on in Washington. I know you've been keeping up with the headlines. The president, Secretary Wright, said 7 million barrels a day are getting out of the Strait of Hormuz, which would be a pretty big deal. How do you view the market dynamics right now? What actually is coming out of the Gulf?
Yeah, our view would be it's probably not quite that much. There are ships that have been transiting out, typically with transponders off, typically at night, and with some support from the U.S. military, and that has helped ease fundamentals in physical markets, and so we've seen price action that has been a little bit, I think, different than people expected. But what has been through it all, and we can talk about it a little bit more if you'd like, is the market's been pretty incredible in terms of how it's adjusted both on the supply and the demand side to buy time and in kind of address the risks that exist.
What is the driving force behind that? Because most people thought we'd be higher than $150 a barrel.
Yeah, well, early on, you saw, the paper markets trade on expectations and narratives. And early on, there was a lot of fear that prices were going to go that high. So you saw paper markets really take off. Physical markets followed. And then things have reversed. As the narrative has been, we're closer to the end than the beginning. There's a peace deal that's just around the corner. And physical markets obviously have had to deal with the realities of supply constraints. Early on, demand was strong, and in fact, you saw people buy further out, particularly Asian refiners that typically might buy a couple months in advance, cover themselves further. And so you actually had demand pulled forward at the same time as supply was shut off. And so that's where you saw differentials get very wide. Subsequently, you've got supply from SPRs, you've had supply from ships on the water that were sanctioned and were then allowed to unload. You've seen commercial inventories drawn down. You're seeing turnarounds and maintenance activities deferred in facilities that allow supply to keep flowing. Some movements now through the Straits. So there's been a supply response, as you would expect, and there's been a demand response. China had been buying a lot of oil for their SPR. That has come down. You've seen certain measures, primarily in Asian economies, to reduce energy intensity of their activities. You've seen some substitution to coal and other things that have taken some pressure off of markets. And so both supply and demand have responded, and I think the market has bought time. Now, the reality is inventories are a lot lower today, other than in China, where there still are very healthy inventories. But when you look at products, we've moved from comfortable inventories under normal times to what would be soon to be uncomfortable. And I think that's the real question is, how much longer can these measures kind of ameliorate the risk? And at some point, they may not be able to.
Well, I go.
The supply was shut off, and so that's where you saw differentials getting very wide. Subsequently, you got supply.
So you started a business. That's huge.
I mean, it's small, but yeah.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Gladiator Barley. This will help to build muscle, detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. Super important to slow down the aging process. And by bringing down free radicals and bringing down inflammation, you're helping your cardiovascular health, boosting up that immune system and endocrine system, helping with brain function. It's a great way to slow down the aging process. Make sure you do a little bit of resistance training and take the Gladiator Barley. You can also stack it with the Myotrol that's on my store. You can also take heirloom barley. If you're not wanting to focus on increasing your muscle mass, take the heirloom barley. This will detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. So please go to my store, get the heirloom barley or the Gladiator Barley. You can stack it with the Boomer Boost. It's a great way to control your A1C levels. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Alrighty. We have more news. All right, let's just wait for Bloomberg to recycle through their commercial break.
Protect for 20,000 miles guaranteed, and keep your engine running like new for longer. Clean your engine in one oil change with new Mobile One Advanced Clean.
To the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Some of the venture firms that have backed SpaceX are set to earn tens of billions of dollars in returns today. They include Founders Fund, Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia Capital. Bloomberg's Ventures reporter Rebecca Torrance joins us now. I mean, it's paper money, but it's big money.
it's huge money. And I think one of the most interesting things about this is that not just SpaceX's early backers are going to make a huge windfall off of this, but even some of the late ones as well. So Sequoia and Andreessen Horowitz both came in fairly late relative to the entire life cycle of this company, the multi-decade history, and yet stand to make tens of billions of dollars off of this IPO. Of course, the same is true for some of its early backers as well, and longtime Elon Musk allies, including Ballard Equity Partners and Founders Fund.
Yeah, the Founders Fund number, like you double check it, 50 billion plus, because, I was on stage with Trey Stevens the other day, one of the 12 investing partners at the firm. I think they did 600 million over a many period of time. Like, just talk about those two bigger beasts.
Right. So, I think it's really fascinating to see how Musk's early allies continue to back him, of course, across the lifetime of this company. First investments around 2008, 2009. Of course, it's been many years since then. Some of these folks back from the PayPal days, for example, Peter Thiel, and early investors that believed in Musk and the SpaceX before the space economy really took off.
For Andreessen, this will be the biggest return in the firm's history. Bloomberg's Rebecca Torrens, top job. Thank you very much. What does this IPO mean for other AI IPOs in the pipeline? Goldman Sachs President and COO John Waldron.
Oh, what happened? No, it died.
Just OpenAI. They don't believe in spreading your. Bets like this. But is it okay that they're all kind of in on the same business model here?
They are, but AI is such a big market. There's so much opportunity. When we looked at OpenAI and they're doing good, at the same time we found that Anthropic was focusing on more enterprise level, AI. So they're more focusing on the business to business side. They're more research oriented. So we felt that they have a different flavor. So you like vanilla ice cream, at the same time you like chocolate as well. So we kind of invested in two different types of AI infrastructure. We also invested in XAI. So we thought that we'll actually take part in every single angles of the domains that these companies are focusing on.
I think what's really interesting here, Ed, and I bring this to you, is that if you think about Thrive, they're in SpaceX too, but at the time they weren't thinking of SpaceX as an AI company.
Yeah.
This has become quite a late power play for Elon.
Yeah, and he's, Christian Garrett from 137 Ventures is with us, and we're going to speak to him later in the hour again. The idea here is that the thesis is constantly evolving with SpaceX. But when I read the prospectus, the TAM number, the story that they're pitching investors of the future, I bet you it's very similar to what Anthropic and OpenAI write in their prospectus. That's difficult to market.
It is, but if you look at SpaceX, when I look at SpaceX, I look at it as a AI, energy, and connectivity infrastructure conglomerate. If you look at Starlink, I see the potential is huge. We have only 10 million subscribers, 12 million subscribers of SpaceX Starlink right now. If you look at the number of internet users in the world, there are 6 billion people using internet, and everybody is moving to Starlink. So if you look at that way, that Starlink has a huge potential. Then you look at their plan for what they're trying to do. They're trying to create AI infrastructure in the orbit. They can do it because they have launch capability, and they can do it at a minimum cost. So if you look at SpaceX, they're playing a different game. they're not only thinking that they're going to become an AI company, but they're an AI infrastructure company. Down line, the backbone of the whole software AI development you're seeing right now.
Yes, briefly, SpaceX is one of your most significant positions, valued at over $1 billion as it stands. And do you hold it for the long term?
I will hold it actually, and I feel very positive that the Starlink usage is going to grow significantly. Every single car, every single plane, every single person in the world, a big portion of the 6 billion internet users are also going to come under Starlink usage. And I feel that this company will grow at least 30% each year from here on for the next 10, 20 years. And I want to hold it for the long term.
Pegasus fan, CEO, and Uzerman, fantastic to have you staying up late for us. Meanwhile, we just get the latest indications of prices. SpaceX shares indicated to open at $159.90. That's 18% above its IPO price. Coming up, we're delving ever more into SpaceX's blockbuster Wall Street debut, critical test for the company of Elon Musk. And what is therefore he worth? More than $1 trillion if we hold on to this number. You've got the dilution.
He would hit a trillionaire status if it was $138 a share. So it's $159.90 fully diluted. The company's worth $2.2 trillion, which say it out loud again, $2.2 trillion. Maybe we'll see. There's a lot more to come. State of play. It's not yet trading. These are indications that we're getting ahead of the start of trading.
When is it going to trade? I don't know. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. Collagen will help with your skin, help with your nails and hair, musculature, bone density, and even joints. Take it every day. It's a month supply. You can mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, even with milk, or some people put it in coffee. So please go to my store, get the collagen. This will help with the dermal layer. It will cross-link with the vitamin C and improve that dermal layer. So the vitamin C and magnesium that I have in my store, take it also with this collagen, drink filtered water, and it'll improve your dermal layer. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into
on the commonalities with the U.S. president saying that along with Donald Trump, he is committed to making sure that Iran would not have nuclear weapons and that this was.
Having said that, there is some talk that Israel should be able to go it alone, that should be able to take action independently to prevent Iran from ever resuming its nuclear or uranium enrichment activities. Realistically, former generals and experts say that this is simply not feasible. Israel and the United States are too interlinked. Israel is too dependent on the U.S. to go it alone militarily, not just because it receives U.S. weapons, but because it needs U.S. support to take such significant military action in the region.
All right, Al Jazeera's Noor Data reporting for us live from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Let's go over to Heidi Pett, who is in Beirut monitoring the situation there in Lebanon. So Heidi, bring us up to speed on what's happening on the ground. There's a lot of talk about Lebanon, but are we any closer to an end to this conflict?
It certainly doesn't feel that way today. There has been no visible, measurable de-escalation here on the ground in Lebanon. In fact, Israeli strikes have continued. Notably, we've seen strikes in a number of significant towns and villages. So one of those is Majd al-Zoom, which has been the focus of a lot of Israeli fire over the last 1 or 2 days. And that is because Hezbollah says they have been trying to advance into that village under the cover of those airstrikes, as well as shelling from white phosphorus. Now, Hezbollah, in a statement a short time ago, said that it fired rockets at Israeli troops in that area and did force them to retreat from that town. But they are continuing to attempt to to advance northwards, not just in Majd al Zoon, but in multiple other locations as well. And one of the other significant places where we have seen airstrikes over the last day is the village of Dabin. Now, this is one of the locations where there was supposed to be a test, a pilot program for the Lebanese army to go in and take control of some of these parts of the south. And instead, what we have seen is Israeli airstrikes on that village just today. It's not the only airstrikes that we've seen today. There's also been artillery shelling, continued movement by drones. The surveillance drone has been above us here in Beirut over the course of the day, and as well in the Bekaa Valley. And we've seen a number of operations announced by Hezbollah, but the concern here is very real, because the last time there was speculation, the last time there was talk, the last time there was even an announcement from one of the facilitators of the deal that Lebanon was going to be included, and I'm referring there to the Pakistani Prime Minister, who on the 8th of April said that Lebanon was included in a regional ceasefire. What happened instead was the most violent day of the war so far, when Israel sought to make it very, very clear that Lebanon was not included. And the fear here is that we may once again see an Israeli escalation, a strike on the southern suburbs of the capital in an attempt to draw Iran into...
Black mana is ambition. Power at a price. Turning risk into resources. To win, you must move in the shadows, make the hard call, and sacrifice.
And now to head over to our London studio, here's my colleague, Jonah Hall.
Hello there and welcome to Al Jazeera's London studio. Since the start of the war in Iran, the European Union has spent about $49 billion more on fossil fuels, about half of that on natural gas alone. That's despite a major push to become energy independent after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Before that war began, 45% of gas imported by the EU came from Russia. Well, last year that was down to 12%. The European Commission says the bloc aims to phase out Russian gas completely by next year. Well, Russian oil, meanwhile, accounted for 27% of imports and now stands at just 2%. Well, making up the gas shortfall are Norway with pipeline gas and Qatar and the United States with liquefied natural gas. But Norway is operating close to maximum output, and ships from Qatar through the Straits of Hormuz are currently disrupted. So the US has become the EU's largest source of LNG, accounting for 2/3 of imports. But Europe is now also competing with Asia for those gas supplies, which means a price war, with previously agreed LNG supply contracts potentially able to be diverted to a higher bidder mid-journey. One solution is decreasing the continent's reliance on fossil fuels and looking to renewable energy instead. This week, the European Commission pledged around $6 billion to renewable projects in North Africa and the Middle East. The EU aims to mobilize up to $32 billion in investment in renewable energy and clean technology by 2035. Well, Naeem Aslam is the founder and chief investment officer at Zay Capital Markets. He joins us here in the studio. Good of you to be with us. We're looking at Europe's energy stability, its energy security. It thought, of course, that it had secured its supplies after the invasion of Ukraine in 2022 by diversifying away from Russia. The war in Iran, though, has exposed new vulnerabilities, right?
Yes, to a larger extent, because we are still very much importing the shock. As you correctly mentioned, Europe has been able to diversify in terms of its supplier, because Russia and Ukraine war happened in sort of an unprepared manner. But in this particular war, many were anticipating it long coming, especially when Donald Trump came into power. So, but yes, there are still more opportunities to diversify. The problem is still at home. We are still vulnerable to external shocks. Our growth, our efficiencies are very much driven something which is taking place beyond our shores, and that is energy. So the answer to really rectify this problem is to solve it at home by applying appropriate various different diversifications, so we are not always exposed to not only the gas prices, because let's say that the conflict like this breaks up. It's not the problem is not always the diversification. The problem is the actual price at the pump where they are pumping. It goes up. On top of that, very briefly, it is also your freight prices, your insurance prices, everything else that goes into it.
Well, of course, some say renewables is the answer, but that may be many years away. Let's look at the hard effects of all of this now, not just price rises and inflation, which we talk about quite often here, but energy price shock is really starting to bite national economies as well. It's hitting growth. Germany has the largest economy in Europe. Research Institute DIW Berlin is now expecting it to slip into technical recession this year. That's 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. But here in the UK, the economy shrank by 0.1% in April. Some of that due to energy prices, but also commercial disruptions in the Middle East affecting businesses here. And there are fears the economic slowdown will intensify throughout the year. Naeem, once more, with all of that in mind, we sit on the verge of a potential peace deal. We've been here, of course, before, haven't we?
Yeah.
But it's not as simple, is it, as opening the Strait of Hormuz and allowing energy supplies to pass through it. This is going to take time. These effects are going to linger.
100%, because we are hostage in a short-term position. The long-term solutions are very different in terms of renewable. But this kind of a shock that we have imported this time for Europe is much worse than inflation situation, because we have a decompression of growth over in Europe, what is at stake. So yes, the United States could perhaps form a deal, which we don't know how many times do we hear that on a daily basis. But if that happens, we still have plenty of other issues. Consumers are already paying higher. Prices are already going up. Central bank has already increased interest rate yesterday. UK, as you pointed out, we've already first negative reading. And this is all happening while we have not actually seen the real data, the real impact of what has happened with respect to Strait of Hormuz. Because those data number, or those numbers, they're only going to be coming in Q2 and Q3. Are we prepared for that one? Yes, the headline will make many sexy headlines from President Trump.
The worst, in other words, may still lie ahead.
Yeah.
Look, meanwhile, as European economies evidently struggle, there is one sort of potential beneficiary to all of this, and that's Russia. And the EU, of course, wants to stop Russia from benefiting from rising oil prices, which in turn are used to help fund its war in Ukraine. Well, to achieve that, it's proposed a 6-month delay to a planned increase of its price cap on Russian oil. The Commission is considering keeping the cap at around $44 a barrel. Otherwise, based on the EU's sanctions mechanisms, the cap would rise to at least $65 a barrel next month. The Iran war having pushed up energy prices. Well, last year, the EU introduced a cap at 15% below the average market price to be reviewed every 6 months. EU operators are only allowed to transport Russian oil if it's sold at or below that limit. But as Yulia Shapovalova reports now from the capital Moscow, the measures may not be enough to make Russia rethink its policies.
Another batch of sanctions on Moscow in response to the Ukraine war. The European Commission wants to reduce Russia's energy revenues with measures that will primarily affect oil trading. Since 2022, the EU has significantly cut its dependence on Russian energy and has increased imports of more expensive liquefied natural gas, or LNG, from the US.
Those who shoot themselves in the foot need to figure out how to ensure their energy security. Russia has always been and remains a reliable supplier of energy resources for both European.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. Collagen helps to remodel joints that are either arthritic or a sports injury. Take it every day. You could stack it with the collagen to also improve joint health and remodeling. Collagen works by blocking certain types of enzymes and receptors. The one receptor to reduce pain is blocking NAV 1.7. Another receptor or enzyme that it inhibits, is EP4, which reduces inflammation. And so if you have EP4 that's expressed, higher inflammation at the joint. But if you can block EP4, then inflammation starts to go down. You want to bring down that inflammation. Collagen also blocks MMP3 and MMP13. And what they do is reduce, by blocking those enzymes, you're reducing the erosion of the joint. If MMP3 and MMP13 is overexpressed because of an injury or arthritis, further joint erosion takes place. So you want to block that. Collagen does this. Okay, now collagen also helps to recruit collagen type 2 to remodel the cartilage, and ACAN to cushion the joint, glucosamine to remodel the cartilage, and chondroitin to cushion the joint. So over time, you're remodeling the joint. And what you also want to do is do these exercises where you're opening up the arthritic joint or the sports injury up to the point of pain, and then go just a little bit more and count to 30, 20 or 30 seconds. Do that 2 or 3 times a day, and do that every day. Take the collagen and take the collagen. And what you will notice over time is that you'll be able to open up the joint with less pain and have that joint remodel and heal. So please go to my store, get the collagen, do these exercises I just mentioned, get the collagen from my store, take it every day, and remodel those joints that are arthritic, and also if you have a sports injury. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen to Bloomberg here.
All right, Goldman Sachs banker to specialize in prepaid energy deals. Major hires. That's when they start poaching talent. That's when the banks are saying, "Oh, we might have."
It has shades of like 2007 when everyone decided to get into subprime mortgages because it was a good thing to do.
Right, exactly.
I mean, it wasn't.
I know. Very good. All right, Aaron. Thanks so much for joining us. Aaron Hudson, Bloomberg Municipal Bond Reporter, giving us the latest on the bond market. Mini bond market opening its arms to some of this AI build here. Speaking of the AI build, SpaceX are still waiting for that thing to open. Indications of interest around $150. Remember this thing priced at $135. Let's check in with Seema Shah. She's a Vice President of Research and Insights at Sensor Tower. Seema, I guess one of my challenges is how do you position this company? It's a rocket company. It's got some AI in there. It's got some connectivity. I think they call it. You know, some of the broadband.
AI.
How do you think? I mean, by and
telecom.
large, 75% of their revenue is coming from connectivity, aka Starlink. So that really is the bulk of the business. AI is about 800 million, significantly smaller. Like
But it's going to eat
15%.
up a lot of the capital.
Yes, but it's not where the majority, the non-sexy business that's actually,
Contributing.
are the greatest revenue contributor. So I think at this point, I think it's still really more in that connectivity space, but obviously you have the option on the AI portion of the business, right?
What worries you the most as you look through the numbers here, the contributions from these different lines of businesses, and then compare that with the pricing of the IPO and some of the promises that they're making?
Yes. So objectively, I can't say too much about the pricing, but I will say at $4.5 billion in revenue for the whole thing, the valuation is very high compared to, say, like Walmart, for example, that might make $4.5 billion in a couple of days. So that is one perspective that I'm coming from. But I guess like the AI space, which is really the option, the growth driver, is increasingly becoming very competitive. And while ChatGPT is still the largest, hit 1 billion MAUs, Claude is also growing rapidly. And Claude seems to be pivoting more to enterprise with Claude for Work. But they have many more of their users on desktop than on mobile, relatively speaking. And Grok is not in that top 3. It's in the top 8 in terms of size. It only has 52 million active users globally. So that's 1 billion for ChatGPT, 400 million for Gemini, then 52 for Grok, and then 37 for Claude. But Claude's growth rate is accelerating. A lot of it was due to what happened in March when Anthropic pulled back from the Department of War, and then they got a huge surge. Claude went to #1 on the App Store charts and has maintained that elevated positioning since then. Yeah.
I saw in the prospectus something I hadn't seen since the days I was writing prospectuses back in the late 90s. Total addressable market.
And we can't talk enough about this because it's so mind-blowing, the numbers.
$28
Trillion.
trillion. Do we have any idea? I watched the video. I didn't see any breakdown really too much.
No.
Do we know what that is?
I don't, but as you were saying, it reminds me of 2007. It reminds me of 2000, 1999, where everybody's TAM was like, if I had this many eyeballs, it would be that. So more of a skeptic about this again, but that is, it doesn't make sense how it could be that big and none of your other competitors in any of these sectors have ever hit or mentioned a TAM of that magnitude.
Yeah, I mean, the way we did it back in the day was, hey, here's the global pet food market. We think the internet's going to take 30% of that.
Exactly.
And we think that company X is going to take 10% of the market share. That implies revenue applying.
Right.
Yes, but that's hedging. This is just.
Yeah.
Here's my narrative.
Yes.
And I'm going to present it to you.
And you have a CEO or a top leader who's very well known and has a lot of followers. So that makes the whole IPO and everything just much more exciting than it might be otherwise if you're like, this is a connectivity company and a rocket ship company.
Right. So it's a connectivity company and a rocket ship company and increasingly an AI company.
Yeah.
Will it become an EV company as well? Because there's a lot of talk that Elon Musk is going to combine Tesla with SpaceX.
I mean, I can't say for sure, but historically it's had a tendency to merge his companies together, especially because one might be more profitable than the other. And
do you see any complementary operational, not synergies, but do these businesses complement one another?
I mean, maybe the space business in terms of anything that's reusable or EV energy efficient. AI, maybe you can add that into elements of selling a Tesla or maybe within the car itself. So I could probably see that in the future, and the connectivity, but it's really more like add-ons than I would imagine the production of a car, a production of a rocket. There's probably systems and parts of it or energy and batteries that you could share.
SpaceX opens at $150 a share. There you go. IPO price of $135.
It's happened.
It is open and it is trading. We've got 61 million. They opened this thing on about a 60 million share block. So that's pretty sizable. But it kind of goes to the issue here now that we've got the stock open. They're going to need capital going forward. Do we know? It sounds like their capital needs are going to be, even though they're just raised $75 billion, huge war chest. Yeah. Some of the CapEx numbers I see out there for this company, are they going to do more equity? Are they going to do debt? Do we know what they want to do?
I don't know. I don't imagine you'd want to be diluted any further. So, debt might be more attractive, but again,
but credit investors will look at these numbers in a whole different way than equity investors.
The EBITDA numbers might not be where they want them to be for the credit. So I guess we'll see. I mean, he has a lot of contacts, and you said if he brings in Tesla, what does that mean, right? But there's a lot of legal ramifications. Tesla's board and investors may not be so keen on that. So I think we'll have to wait and see what happens. But specifically from the data we see, it's very competitive in the AI space and the connectivity space. They've really ramped up their advertising for Grok, and X's revenue is still down by our numbers, 60% from the time previous to him acquiring the company to now. So I still think.
All right, so on the telemetry feed that I have that's through YouTube, we're making history here. So on the dashboard, I have SpaceX, it's SPCX. It opened up. Right now it's trading at 159.12. And you see the first 4 candles, minute candles. This is history in the making here. So enjoy.
A number that for most IPOs would be considered, what you'd hope to achieve. But in the sense of this IPO, there's a lot of hype and enthusiasm, and a lot of people involved in this deal. I think maybe people were hoping for a bigger number.
I really like the fact that you started there because the headlines were crossing as of the first 30 minutes of trade, and the initial headline was that it was indicated to open at $175 a piece, and it's been steadily going down. We've gotten headlines about, now it's 174, now it's 172, now it's 170, all the way down to 150. Is that a bad sign?
Yeah, well, just to understand the process a bit better, I mean, Morgan Stanley is a stabilization agent for the IPO, and they also have the role of opening the IPO. But basically, that process involves bringing together all these buyers and sellers for this opening print, and you want to make sure that the opening print is sort of ideally as fair a price as you can get. And generally speaking, from what I'm told, that banks like to have about 500. So, you can see the number there was around 60 million shares, and the IPO was 500. So, about 10% of the stock basically went through in the opening print. That's about standard, right? But that allows the banks to be sort of confident, I guess, that taking the buyers and the sellers together, the price that you're opening the stock at is the price that the market wants to pay. And then looking at the success of this first day trading, one measure of it will be like where the stock closed, and you want the stock to close near to or ideally above where it opened. You don't want it to you want to open the stock really high and then it end the day lower, because that would mean that a lot of people lost money. So that's the art of opening an IPO. But this is just all 1 day's trading and many days ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We got close to 100 million shares trading hands here, again about $159, $160 a share. Open at 150 after pricing at 135 here. How long typically will we see, I guess, higher than usual volume when a company goes public? Does it all get kind of exercised the first day? Does it last a few days?
Yeah, I think from my experience, the first day will be the heaviest day for a while. I mean, the first few days will also be relatively heavy. I mean, SpaceX, the interesting thing with IPOs is that, the art of executing IPOs is to try and place the stock with as many long-term investors as you can, and investors that won't sell. But there's always a portion of the stock you want to get to people who are traders, because obviously we want some stock to be in the market for people to buy and sell, and not to sort of overly exaggerate the price if there's a real supply and demand imbalance. But I think they from the institutional book, they allocated like 70%, I think it was 70% of the deal to what they call long-only investors, or people are not traders, but you are going to have an element of the, as you know from your experience, you're going to have an element of the book that's got to be going to people who are a bit more short term. But the first day will probably be the biggest day of trading. I mean, it may be different from SpaceX, but I mean, when you go and see SpaceX do maybe they'll do another stock sale in the future, or some sort of corporate event. There might be a day when it's higher, but this could be, it could be the highest day of trading for the stock.
It's interesting. I'm just looking at the Rich Go function on the Bloomberg terminal. Had Elon's stake in SpaceX valued at $135 a share, which placed him, again, farther away, the number one richest person on the planet with a net worth of $970 billion. Now, with the rise in the price, he's well over $1 trillion there. So there you go. That's also kind of an interesting event there.
Yeah.
In the world's history, I guess.
Yeah, on paper, of course.
On paper. Of course, exactly right. This has to be, I'm going to call, let's just say, you kind of trade like this today, you call this a successful IPO, and a successful historic IPO for many reasons, not the least of which is the dollars involved. That bodes well, I would think, for the Anthropics of the world, the OpenAIs of the world, which have also filed registration statements to go public. This is going to be a good sign.
Well, I think we'll see how the stock trades today. I mean, to be honest, coming out 11% out of the gate, you probably might be a little worried that it could drift back and maybe end not as well. But I think the banks have put a lot of work into this. So maybe they know that they can get it to finish around where it's opened here, or maybe there's some more enthusiasm for the rest of the day. But I think it shows you that 75 billion is. I mean, we've reported this as a huge number. It's a record deal, but I think even the senior person there at Goldman Sachs today, I saw them note, and something I've been thinking a lot about is that, the numbers we talk about these days are so much larger than even a few years ago. We talk about trillions just offhand, and
just to kind of bring up something philosophical, as we look at the dashboard for SpaceX, it's now trading at 166, 167. And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 candles. All right. It's very similar to looking at a rocket, and it's launching up from its launch pad. And as it's ascending and moving farther away from the Earth and closer to orbit, the visual aspect of the rocket gets smaller and smaller. So you're seeing almost like the vapor trail of SpaceX being launched for the IPO through these candles that are being shown on the screen here. You will never see this again. This is a one-time event here for SpaceX. For the initial public offering and the first 9 or 10 candles that ever have been able to be traded in the open market. Just like a rocket launching from the launch pad, smaller and smaller. You'll see these candles get smaller and smaller and more data points day after day, year after year. But there's this one time where the first 10 minutes of trading have been captured on this show. All right? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nano silver toothpaste. Why? It helps to whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, neutralize, improve your oral cavity, reduce inflammation, and help the health of your gum line. And with good oral hygiene, it's going to also help with cardiovascular health. Now, this toothpaste does not have fluoride. So please go to my store, get a few tubes of this toothpaste, use it every day, especially during the cold season. I also have structural nano silver gels. You can get it in a tube form or the quick dispenser form called Renew. Use it the same way, it's dual purpose. You can use it as a daily skincare to help the topical part of your skin. You can use it on a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn to help heal it quicker. You can use it if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well because of the cold season. Put it on your hands, around your eyes, around your ears, around your mouth, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils, so stay active for 5.5 hours. If you get allergies or you're cleaning the house, take my advice and lightly coat your nostrils. It'll help to reduce the allergies and that issue of dust while you're cleaning. So please go to my store, get the structural nano silver gel. Very high quality. And C60. C60 is a very strong antioxidant. It's very potent. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, and avocado oil. You can get it in a 2-ounce, a 4-ounce, or an 8-ounce configuration. It is cheaper to get the higher ounce configuration per ounce. It's cheaper per ounce to get the higher ounce configuration. So please, take it every day. Teaspoon a day, preferably in an empty stomach in the morning. You'll notice that you recover quicker after a workout. This will soak up free radicals, boost up the health of your mitochondria. You'll have more energy. You'll have a better immune system, better endocrine system. You'll be able to soak up free radicals at the vascular level. So you're reducing the concentration of oxidized LDL. So you're not building up plaque. That's helping your cardiovascular system. You're having better blood flow to the brain, so that's going to help the brain. Also, C60 helps the basal layer of your skin so you look younger. And C60 helps your neurons. You'll have more energy for your neurons. You'll have less stress in your brain tissue. You'll also have your neurons produce a better concentration of neurotransmitters. What's going to happen over time is your neurons will connect better. You'll have better cognition, better memory. You'll be thinking faster. C60 is a very important supplement to take to slow down the aging process. And again, it also helps to boost up the immune system and the endocrine system. So please go to my store, get the C60, take it every day, teaspoon a day. I've been doing this for over 10 years every day. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. That's the end of my show. We have now seen the IPO of SpaceX. Take my advice, Do not buy into it yet. Wait about 2 months or so. I think that SpaceX, the price of SpaceX will most likely go down about 25–30% from the high. And that's the time to accumulate. You can trade it, but SpaceX is probably one of those special stocks that you just want to accumulate and just hold for about 10 years. So that's my advice. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.